February 9th, 2021 at 7:02 p.m. to order. On our agenda today, we will go through some quick updates. We have 3 petitions to go through. One on 201 Ridge Street, 11 Lorena Road, and the third one is 6 Winslow Road. After that, at 7:30, we're going to review the Washington and Swanton requests for proposal discussion. That is dealing with Washington and Swanton. There's been a working group to create an RFP. We'll be reviewing that and providing our feedback on that to that working group. 8 o'clock, we'll kick off our hearing that is scheduled at 8 p.m. for 654 Main Street. The majority of that hearing piece today will be hearing from the public, question and answers from them, questions to us and to the applicant. So we'll go through that at 8. We're giving about an hour and a half of time for public comment and discussion. And then at 9:30, we'll go through new business if we have any at that time to go through. There is a chance that 654 Main Street will bleed into that time, and we will adjourn at 10 p.m. Just so everyone knows, I anticipate there'll be one more meeting of 654 Main Street hereafter, as engineering is not quite ready yet to give us their information. So let's kick it off with updates around town. Brian.
Sure. So thinking about where we should begin. So we haven't talked about the Waterfield lot in a while. So the Waterfield lot, there's the council is still, I believe, finalizing the land development agreement, and then that would be finalized at town meeting. Washington Swanton, obviously, we're talking about a little bit later at 7:30. I'm just trying to think what else would be the most notable last night. The local historic district study committee did go before the select board to talk about the potential or what to, asking for direction about the town center local historic district. And the select board voted last night to start a new study committee to look in the Sims Corner neighborhood to potentially do an LHD in that area around Grove Street or Upper Grove Street, Fenwick area, and to put the one that in the town center on a brief hiatus. They mainly based upon the fact that although there is broad support among the town for a potential LHD in the town center, there was not broad support from the property owners and the business owners and renters, all of those categories in the town center. So in the interest of time, I'll stop there.
So Brian, we never had a chance to discuss it, and I was sorry we didn't. I felt that I had maybe some insight into this one, and that also I did go to the meeting at Town Hall. I just think there were a whole lot of other things that could have been done, and that the CBD, or we'll call it town center, a center district is very different from a residential district. They're just, they have a whole, legally they're handled the same way under an enabling statute, as most people know who are listening in, and you certainly know. But I guess what comes down from Mass Historical Commission is advice that generally relates to local historic districts and residential areas. But the reality also is that there are many of these districts in Massachusetts that are in commercial centers, and many of the properties are owned by LLCs. You're just not going to get them to respond in the same way. The point of these surveys is to suss out, find out how much opposition there is, but that's not a legal mandate. It's just recommendation from MHC. And I did think that there was a lot of learning going on in that one hearing about what that meant for the people who are residents. There were people from the Baptist Church condos, and there were people from, interestingly, the area around Vine Street, and they were just starting to learn about it. So I feel as if we've really missed an opportunity to discuss it, and that it should not be something that we abandon. So I guess I'm just going to say that now, and I hope we can return to it. It would be a real opportunity for the town to have the center as an LHD. So I'm just sorry, we need some opportunity. The community needs another meeting on this.
Brian, Hi, Heather, go ahead. You can go first.
I missed the last LHD meeting, but I thought that one of the issues was that we felt that the properties that would have been included weren't necessarily the highest at risk in town, and that they were already protected in some ways, whereas some of the housing in other neighborhoods is not protected, and we see demolition happening.
The one doesn't take away from the other. So I appreciate that there's certainly been certainly Grove Street has been a vulnerable neighborhood. That doesn't negate, and again, they're not mutually exclusive. It's just the other was set up. And I think the conclusion, what we just heard in this report is wrong. That I believe that you're just simply not going to get a lot of cheering and saying, oh yeah, go for it from a bunch of LLCs. That's what they are. These people are, they're often just a family trusts that own these buildings, and they're pretty far removed. So a different approach is going to be needed to move it forward. That's, I think, I guess I think that it shouldn't be on just tabled. So again, it's not to take away from the interest in working on Grove Street, but they're just different process-wise. And I also felt that there were people who emerged from the Baptist church condos, especially, who were they were taking down notes and they were getting information. This was their first time to hear about it. So sorry, this isn't, I know we don't have a lot of time devoted right now to it this evening, but I was waiting. I've been waiting for quite a long time to have a chance for us to have some input on it.
Brian, did you get any more feedback regarding the new legislation regarding the train station at Wedgemere and the half-mile radius? If it's in an LHD, does it still have to be by right?
We have not gotten any information specifically about an LHD, but I do know that it was determined that if we did, since we do have two stations, it's only one of the stations that is necessary to have the roughly 15 units per acre density, and dealing also with a simple majority or a 3 out of 5 vote needed for special permits when there's an affordable component.
So looking at one of our next meetings, can you do an analysis of the center train station and look at that half-mile radius? I believe the Heritage District falls inside that half-mile radius. And we need to know whether that supersedes the Heritage District restrictions.
Ryan, you're muted.
He's taking notes.
Oh, I can
jump in and say one thing, because I have read the legislation. The actual, it's within the half-mile, but the communities then are charged with establishing a district within that radius. So it's not just a uniform radius that applies. It's within that radius, then this district has to be created. So a district for by right multi-unit construction. So that's, I can answer that to some degree because I've read it.
Yeah, we need to get an evaluation of what needs to be done, and we should get on that as soon as possible.
Right.
We do not fall inside the criteria for that. Okay, I'm going to move on to the petitions. We can come back to updates as we go because I want to stay on schedule.
Yep.
And so for the petitions, we have 3 before us. If the planning board looks like we're going to recommend unfavorable action on any of them, we will open it up to the applicant if they're here, as we have done in the last couple of meetings to save time. Otherwise, we're going to keep it to the planning board and move through these petitions with our recommendations. Sound good?
Yes.
So Brian, want to kick off number 3927, 201 Ridge Street?
Sure. 201 Ridge Street. So this is a very interesting property. It's actually the oldest house in Winchester, constructed in 1711. This project is under site plan review in order to construct a detached barn / garage, where the total floor area of the house, the barn, a separate barn, so this would be a third structure, is greater than 6,000 square feet. Like I said, the house was constructed in 1711, and the historic building form was attached to this memo. And there also is a preservation restriction on this property that prohibits subdivision of the lot, as well as any destruction of the buildings. The proposal entails the destruction of an existing garage and the creation of a new one that, when added together, is more than 6,000 square feet. As long as any of the preservation restrictions are being adhered to as part of the improvements, I saw no negative effects to the neighborhood or the neighbors as a result of the proposed garage, and recommended favorable action based upon the view from the street.
I had a clarifying question.
Oh, I was going to go to Beth real quick just to make sure before we go. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Beth, did the engineering department have any feedback?
Yeah. Good evening. Yeah, we had a comment letter that we provided to the ZBA and planning board with some questions about the drainage design. So I haven't heard back from the applicant, but nothing that would, I think everything is within the realm of being able to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. All right, members of the planning board? Heather?
Oh, I just wanted to ask for clarification because Brian, in your notes, it said that they're demolishing something, but that they're not allowed to demolish anything. And then on the plans, I didn't see anything being demolished. So I was confused.
I'm sorry, that is definitely not true. I'm looking at I'm gonna look at my memo to see where I said it, but nothing is being demolished. The preservation restriction does prohibit demolition. There is no demolition as part of this. Is a new structure on the lot. Yeah. So sorry for that confusion.
The note said demolishing a garage, but then I didn't see that. So maybe it's just a typo.
Sorry, the total mistake.
So are we going in alphabetical order?
You can go next, yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So I have two concerns with this project. One of which is the taking down of several mature trees that are actually shown quite well in, I don't know if you can see this, but Brian, if you go to the pictures that were provided, that might be better than me holding them up to the mic.
Yeah, I can get them up in a minute.
Yeah, I can't see myself.
I'm just getting it up. Just give me a minute.
You can do it the low tech way. No, you got it. Okay. That one, let's go to the top one right there. So this is the proposed location. And you can see the tree on the left is going. That large pine tree, which is some 20 some inches across, I believe, as well as two trees to the right. I guess those bushes, the shrubs are going, but also two large trees to the right. And so I am wondering if they can't change the position to avoid cutting down these tall, mature trees. And if you could go to the lower right photo in that same page. Yep, that one right there. If you could zoom in on that one. So I have, you can see how, oh, let's scroll that puppy back up. Yep. So I believe that tall tree that's right almost in the middle of the picture is one of the ones that's being taken down. And I am a little concerned about the view shed from the road. As you stand in the road, you see the house. One of the, are we under site plan review here? I forget.
Yes, site plan review.
Yeah, one of the ones we do, we have to look at what the view sheds from the public right of ways are. And so here we see the house, and it's hard for me to, I think what would happen is the garage will perhaps block some of the view of the house. I can't tell from here because I can't really visualize the size of the house. But I think it would certainly, it may impact the public view of this very important historical structure. So those are my two concerns. One, can they move the building so they don't have to take down the trees? And what is the real impact on the view from the road? And that's
There
it.
was
Thank
a
you.
comment from the design review committee as well. I don't know, Brian, can you bring that up? So usually we, especially because they didn't make it in time for our packets, we should be hearing about the other boards.
So just to address what Diab has raised, if we go a couple more sheets forward, you can flip between the site existing and the site new, and you'll see that the first tree, Diab, I think stays. It's the trees between the house and the barn that actually end up being lost, I believe. There you go. You have to zoom out just a little bit more. Or down, move down, yeah. Now if you toggle between the next slide and this slide, you'll see where the tree on the lower left, it's maintained. I believe that's the one you see from the street, yeah. But the two above that to the right, yeah, those look like they're right at the edge of the new structure.
I believe that, and I'll have to find it, that one on the lower left is actually, there's a remark on one of the sheets that it's to be removed. Okay,
Oh, it's
so
okay.
If you go to that one right there, and if you see, it says, I wish you could see my pointer, but you can see, it says remove existing tree.
You're right. You're right.
There.
And then it says proposed grass paver. So that's another sort of grass driveway there next to the barn.
Yeah, it just.
Okay, great.
And I did have one further thing, and I'm just clueless. I don't know what this chip seal driveway is. Is that just simply asphalt?
Sorry. Which portion you're saying, which is asphalt?
Well, they're going to remove the gravel driveway and replace it with a chip sealed driveway. It's almost right in the middle of the screen right now.
Yeah.
So is that just simply asphalt?
Yeah, Diab, this is Brian. I'm the new assistant engineer. I can answer that a little bit for you.
Yeah.
That's kind of like it's like a coarse asphalt. It's like a very coarse, rough asphalt. So it's like an asphalt emulsion with like these chip stones that are kind of like embedded on the top of it. So it's like it's not like an asphalt road is a typical sense, but it's a lot rougher.
So when you look at it, will it look dark or?
I think it would look it would have a look of like whatever chip kind of color, like the aggregate that they put in there would look like. So if they're using like a limestone kind of, or like a granite color kind of, it will have like a lighter color. But if they use something that was darker, it would have that, but it would reflect that color.
Okay, so they put the asphalt down, then they spread the chips on top of it, because otherwise it would just be black like the asphalt, and they don't actually like go over it and squish it in. Okay, so it might. My concern is that it will be out of context in terms of the rest of the more historical look of the property.
Yeah, it would be interesting to. I mean, if you want to ask the applicant what they propose on putting down, but this would look more like an asphalt road than it would be a gravel driveway. However, it depends on what kind of chips they decide to put down. That would really sway it one way or the other. But there is a little bit of variability in how it could look. But I would say it would lean more towards an asphalt surface than a gravel surface.
Okay, thank you.
I think it looks like crushed stone, actually. It's kind of like a French countryside type of surface. My neighbors in Winchester have it, and it's very hard to take care of, actually. When you start trying to plow it in the winter, you actually can't use a real plow. You have to use something very careful. So it's it's just a light crushed stone look.
Thanks.
Other members of the planning board? Any entertain a motion?
Well, I can have a motion if people are okay with putting a couple of conditions on our approval. I would move for approval with the condition that they try to relocate the structure so that it doesn't take down the mature trees and doesn't impede the view of the main house from the road.
Is there a second?
I'm sympathetic, but I think the most long-lasting issue is the view of the house. I don't know, the tree, I can't address the condition of the tree. That's beyond me. There are often issues, and I don't want to get into it in this meeting. So I guess I would support the I guess it was the Design Review Committee's idea that it would be, I think, advantageous for the interest that the community has in the view of the house. But I don't know about the trees. It's just, we don't know enough, and I don't want to start there.
Yeah, I think the view, actually, Maureen, to what you're saying, the view from the street, the photograph that they took looks fairly accurate. And if you locate the mature tree there, the view of the house doesn't look like it goes away if the barn is behind that mature tree in relationship. The hedges, quite frankly, that the owner has in front of the house are more, they've created a privacy
Right.
with those hedges that I think is, if the house stays in line with the driveway, or the driveway remains where it is today, then I think view of the house will remain as it is today.
Mm-hmm.
But if the hedges come out in the future, then what you'll see most prominently is the garage.
Right.
And since they can take those hedges down anytime they want,
Or another
or
owner.
a future owner could.
Yeah, but that's because the barn is in front of the house. I mean, that means you'd have to put the barn behind the house if you needed to, guess what they were going to do with their hedges in the future.
Well, they could move the.
I was just going to say it's interesting because I was fine with the barn, but we normally wouldn't allow a garage in front of a house.
Ah.
It is a garage, not
It's
a barn.
garage. Yeah.
True.
I mean, the topography looks somewhat steep, but there is certainly room to push the garage, let's call it what it is, a garage, towards the neighboring property and maybe relieve. I mean, the gradient there looks pretty, I can't tell. It's not too horrible.
Yeah, I think there's a drop right behind the barn that gets, it almost have to come closer to the road to be able to move north.
Well, actually, if you look at it actually goes up behind there. Brian, if you could move back to the photographs.
You know what? Rather than trying to solve this, could we we really have a very busy evening, and there are a lot of questions we can't resolve here. Can we just make some general comments? And I think there's some agreement that we, I think there's some agreement, but it takes greater scrutiny than we can give it.
I did put forth a motion.
Is there a second?
Just to say what the motion was, relocate the structure so this doesn't impede the view of the house from the road, and as well as to try to maximize the preservation of mature trees.
Why don't we instead pose it as some questions for the ZBA and let them, because they'll spend a whole evening on these, with 3 or 4 of these. We have a very big evening ahead of us.
Well, then please pose the questions. I guess if no one's going to go for this motion, then I withdraw it. There are any other members of the board interested in seconding it?
Yeah, I'll second it.
All right, there's a motion with a second. Any more discussion? I personally think it would be a better design if it was pushed back slightly.
Well, I agree. Okay, go for it.
I think it'd be a better design pushback. You could get a better view of the main house to see that it's there. You're not looking at the barn. They are planting 8 new trees on the street side, which looks like they're getting rid of the evergreens and they're putting trees in those spots. So we'll open up that lot a little bit better. But I do think pushing it just slightly back a little bit towards the left side would actually be a better design overall.
So I'm looking at the elevations, and that would mean cutting into the hill even more. So it's definitely a landscape challenge, but worth asking if they want to level the landscape or leave it historic.
Well, you could build it into the hill a little bit.
It's already built into the hill, Heather. It's pretty deep in the hill, actually.
Yeah. You're talking not moving it all the way back to the side. It's just shifting it back so you can get some perspective of the historical house in the view.
Or they could,
okay.
They could put it on the hill.
I'm fine with the trees because they're planting new trees, but it has to do more with the visibility of the historical house. So, and I think the perspectives and the lines that you would see on Ridge Street would be better as well. The view sheds to that house. So there's a motion on the table. Any more discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Hannon, aye.
Jarius, aye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Von Mering, aye. Motion passes 5-0. Moving onward to, sorry, now I have all the papers from this.
It's okay. I'll go in. It's 11 Lorena.
You're ready. Yep.
11 Lorena.
Petition number 3928.
So this is applicant seeking a site plan review due to a change in slope by more than 6% of an area more than 500 square feet. Property is located in RDB and contains about 48,000 square feet. So this is the construction of an in-ground pool and terrace and the regrading of the backyard with associated retaining walls. There is significant earthwork here that's proposed for this project, and the hope would potentially be that if there could be less earthwork and therefore less retaining walls, but although the work is significant, I fail to see how this could negatively affect the neighborhood or the neighbors from a visual standpoint, considering this will really not be seen very much from the front. And during most of the year, this area will be shielded from the southern and western neighbors. The only comment I really had was that arborvitaes should not be used as screening for the wall or other features, as these trees tend not to survive after the first few winters. The stormwater here is probably more of the larger issue based on the significant amount of impervious that's being created over the change in slope. And that is all I have.
Members of the planning board? Oh, I'm sorry, Beth. Engineering department?
Yep. So we did provide a comment letter again with some questions on the drainage analysis. And I would note that an abutter who spoke on behalf of several abutters provided a comment letter today with some questions and concerns regarding the downstream stormwater impacts, which I suggested to Janine that the applicant's engineer should respond to. So, there is a lot of ledge out there. It's a steep slope. So I do think there's, some additional work to be done to make sure that this project will not have any impacts from a stormwater perspective on their neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Members of the planning board?
I just want to make a more general comment that somehow when these go to the ZBA should understand, and I don't know if it's for us to do, but that when the design review committee and the historical commission met, they didn't have the letter that was sent by the abutters that got circulated today. So when people are on these, we're volunteers sitting on these boards and we don't hear back from the abutters because the abutters aren't aware of these meetings, then that skews the way the outcome goes when it gets to the ZBA. It's deeply concerning. So I know that's maybe not directly on the topic, but it certainly comes up because of what happened today when we received this letter. It's just that, wow, we're not functioning real well here in Winchester. That's not right. The whole point of these hearings, and the hearing, I'm talking about the hearing, when the letters go out to the abutters, is to give a kind of balanced, fair opportunity between the proponents and the abutters. And that's lost when the abutters are not included in the debate when these advisory boards are meeting. So I think we've got to go back to the ZBA, to the building/zoning office and look again at that letter that goes out so the abutters know when these other boards are meeting. So that's all I'll say for that. But we've got to respond. It's not right. It skews the outcome. It does once it gets to the ZBA.
So Maureen, what did we work on that about 3 years ago, that letter? So we just need to double check, Brian, if the letter that we had worked on with council and everything is the same one that was sent to the applicants and all the abutters. We just double check that?
Sure.
Okay.
It's not. I can say that because we were the abutters to something, and it doesn't explain how there are these other boards, and you need to look at the town's website government calendar. And you are encouraged to, that these boards, it should be a nice paragraph that says all these advisory boards.
It was, and it also gave the email addresses, and that's why we made the email addresses for the Historical Commission, Design Review, and Planning Board, because then you don't ever have to change that document. You could just email everyone can email each of those boards asking when they're going to meet. So
that's not coming out.
Yeah,
that's a problem. Okay, that is certainly a problem, and I would agree.
But that's outside of our authority as well. We can do it. We can draft the letter. We can make it. We can give it to the ZBA.
I understand totally.
But it's up to them. But if there's a loss of that, it needs to get back in. We can ask them to bring it back in.
All we can do is point
message
it out.
received.
Okay.
so
Anyway, we got a letter today, so we've got information the other two boards don't have.
well, I think that the letter are we ready for comments on the project?
Yes, let's go.
Okay, so there's a lot about this project I don't like. This slope is huge. If you go around to the other on the street that's on the other side, the abutters in the back of this project are way downhill, if I recall, from my last trip down that road. And so this is going to look like an enormous wall. The arborvitae are an attempt to shield the pool from Lorena, which doesn't really need it. And I don't see any attempt to try to shield this from the rear abutters. So I have a significant problem with that, because I think that we do have to take into account the impact on the abutters. That's actually in one of the criteria. And this is an awful lot of earth that's being removed. And we went through, I don't know how many revisions of the property on Forest because of the amount of earth that was being moved around. So I would like to see this reduced considerably. And those are my comments.
Would you recommend our unfavorable action?
I would, but I'd like if there are any other members of the board who have their own opinions, I'd like them to.
It struck, I actually know the prior owners, or knew, not personally, but this was on a garden tour. I mean, the whole thing, beautiful setting. And then reading the letter today was quite illuminating. This is a very, the retaining wall, everything about it just go. And what's the purpose? What was the purpose of modifying the zoning bylaw with these criteria in the site plan review, and these retaining walls and changes in grade and what it does to the topography was part of the purpose. It wasn't just about impact on the neighborhood, it's impact on the land.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, but also the photos that they included show like a really natural landscape and more of like a rock terraced area there. And so it's going from like a more of a natural grade to this horrible wall. I feel like they could soften it somehow with, multiple terraces or something that's landscaped so it doesn't read as a wall like that.
Well, Cheryl, did you want to have any comments?
I'm actually trying to read the letter that Maureen talked about. If someone else wants to go first or go before me, sorry.
So from my perspective, I think the rendering doesn't give it much help because the rendering isn't showing the rock walls. They're showing more like a man-made wall. And there are on this site, there are the rock walls that are shown. So I'm not too concerned if it was rocked walls, but I'm concerned that the other side of the rock wall is not landscaped. So the landscaping stops at the rock wall. And I can't quite fully understand because of the site plan that we have, the assessor's map actually cut off the abutters and where the abutters properties stand. So Brian, are you able to pull up Zillow or map fully to see the aerial?
Not the best view.
No. So, so that's the courts over there. So right now there is no structures or anything in the vicinity of where that huge wall is going.
I do not see. Do you have it up on the screen, Ryan? Because I only see the plans.
He did a second ago. There it is.
And you could pull up the GIS that would show the property boundaries and the building footprints.
Gave you the
Somehow I'm not seeing your screen. Oh well.
Is everybody else seeing the screen? Right now it's Town of Winchester GIS.
Yep, I can.
Yes.
Deb, are you on a delay?
I can see everyone move their head on camera. I can't see the screen change. So I'm still
All right, there we go.
seeing
Thank you, Pat, for recommending that. So right now you have the
You
building.
can put the topo on. Sorry, you can put the topo on too if you want, if that's easier for people to see.
Yeah, I'm still not seeing it. Nope.
Sorry, Dee. I hate to say it. It's you. It's you.
It's
man.
me.
Yeah.
So if I think I'm going to have.
Can you copy the link and send it to Deb in a text?
I may have to leave and re-enter because if my screen is frozen, I won't be able to see the rest of the meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me do that.
What is the address of the building with 155 over the top of it? The topography line, 155 to the left.
I don't know, but if we're going from 155 to 175, that's a 20-foot drop. Is that true?
So it's where this just says parcel address Lorena Road. It doesn't actually have. It just has a parcel ID. It's weird that it's not addressed in the GIS.
Okay. So my thought is you have that huge retaining wall. It's pretty invasive. The other side of it is on the other side of that wall, there isn't landscaping to mitigate the impact of that. And I am concerned about the engineering parts, but I'll leave that to engineering in terms of runoff. This whole neighborhood has had, with the amount of development they've had over the years, they've been always been having problems with runoff and the amount of water that's going on because of this such an extreme slope going on in the rock. So it's outside of my expertise, but there are concerns that I would like to make sure are reviewed deeply.
Yeah, so this, I can now see the topo, thanks. So this kind of underscores my concern. There's a significant drop off there. So.
Is there a motion?
Well, there seems
If
to be
there's no
sentiment
motion,
here.
but we'd like to just make notes of things that we'd like the ZBA to look into and review.
Well, I would say I would propose a motion for unfavorable action based on the fact that it does not minimize, what is the wording in the review? Does not minimize, it's not soil removal, but does anyone remember what the words are?
Cut and fill.
Cut and fill.
Yep.
Does not minimize cut and fill. The wall, the height of the wall impacts the rear abutters. Heather Hannon mentioned it does not retain the natural step landscape, and also there is no screening of the wall from the rear abutters.
I'll second the motion.
Motion been second. Discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Hannon, aye.
Jarius, aye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf eye.
Von Mering, aye. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to the third one.
Very quickly, I know that, so I hate the point of order, I guess. But typically what we said at the beginning was that if we were thinking of voting unfavorably, we would then, I know we have a timing issue here, but we usually then ask the applicant to come in. It's obviously too late. I just wanted to make that point.
So you are correct. I did say that. Why don't we give them a moment if they are here to, if they have any questions or comments that they would like to give the planning board.
We really have to set times though if people are speaking, because we really have, I mean, we're running our own hearing with our it's our ball game. This isn't.
Yeah, for the applicants, I would say 3 minutes, but we don't need a presentation. I think you heard what our concerns are. And if you have reasons to offset those concerns, if you could let us know.
So I'll keep this quick. I appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit. I'm Scott Henderson. I'm the project engineer, principal at Henderson Consulting. Just a few points of emphasis on some of the comments that were brought up. We understand the topography is challenging to work with. The site doesn't allow for an area to place a pool. And so, in order to create a plateau to be able to build one, the attempt was to extend those existing 8 to 10 foot tall retaining walls that exist behind the house now and provide the patio along the rear of the house, and to extend that and face that wall in a way with a natural New England style stone to try and, emanate or recreate what's there now and extend that. As far as landscaping is concerned, behind the wall, on the second sheet of the site plan set, there is a landscape layout. That wall is about 65 feet from the nearest abutting property line to the back. In between there and the proposed wall, there's some existing mature trees and a proposal to plant 5 trees that are going to be approximately 30 feet tall at the time of planting. At great expense to the applicant there, putting in trees that are 4 or 5 inch caliper, which is significantly larger than what is typically planted. In an attempt to screen that from the neighbor. So I want to make clear that there was no ignoring the perspective of the direct abutters to the rear. In fact, it was sort of a point of emphasis. That retaining wall, you're right, we have 16 feet to make up between the walkout at the existing back of the house and the bottom of that wall. and you know, the previous builders or the owners in history had, you know, built those 10-foot tall walls to create patios. Well, we're looking at an attempt to avoid removing ledge, because there is significant amount of ledge in that area. Place the pool as low as it can reasonably go. Step that wall. It is a 4-foot wall at the high end directly adjacent to the house to try and put that down. And 7 feet is about as low as we can make that wall. And with the 65-foot depth between our property line and that wall, there's ample space to be able to address both planting and stormwater, which is part of the, you know, the application as it's presented now. We understand if there are concerns from the neighborhood, and we just got this letter today as well. The applicant did speak with some abutters. They've expressed concerns. We have a meeting set up with the neighborhood on Saturday where we are going to walk the site and discuss that with them. So I think what's important to understand the concerns of the planning board, those aren't unaddressed or ignored by the project team as a whole. I think quite the opposite is a significant point of emphasis. Lastly, we did receive the letter from Beth regarding the drainage. Again, you know, there are some things to adjust, but as the professional designing that, I'm comfortable that we're going to come to an ability to be able to mitigate that additional impervious area. It's about 1,900 square feet. There's room for infiltration. We're aware of the existing sort of flooding and ponding issues that exist at the back of these properties, as there is a pond at the rear of the abutters to the back. So, you know, understand the concerns, but they aren't, you know, they haven't been unconsidered or not considered as part of this project. So.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I think I pointed it out when I was talking about your perspectives is you actually do not show, first of all, the rock wall is not shown as it's not
correct
as you're talking about it. And also the landscaping to mitigate that is not shown as well. It is in your plans, but the clarity of how much it coverage and what it actually looks like is not in any of your perspectives. So you have the points of the planning board. It's just a recommendation. And when you go to the ZBA, if you can provide information to counter where the planning board's coming from, you should bring it. But it sounds like you're on the right track. We don't have enough information, right, based on with some of the stuff that came in, like engineering's letter and various things like that, to address those things. So right now, I would like the planning board to keep the motion and proceed with the next item agenda. And Mr. Henderson, you can take those notes, and when you go into the ZBA, you can provide information to counter or to provide more information to deal with the concerns of the planning board, if that's okay.
Absolutely, will do.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Henderson. Have a good
Thank you. You too.
Number 39296 Winslow Road. Brian?
Yep, so this is a special permit under 355 to construct an addition that will be located closer to the side property line and permitted as of right. I believe we had 7 Winslow last month for a very similar project. Project is located in RDB 10 and is undersized at around 6,000 square feet. No structures on Winslow Road were located in Macris. The house was built in 1920. So this is actually, the proposal entails the destruction of a rear deck and allows the extension of the house towards the rear with a new smaller deck and a small extension. The side setbacks are either unaltered or getting larger, which is good. The green space is increased and the hardscape is decreased. I noted that this project, I did not have any problems with this project and did not think that the neighbors had any problem either, considering we got a robust neighborhood response. Thank you.
I'm going to move, Heather. I just want to make recommend favorable action. Again, I'm one eye to the time. This looks fine.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I second that.
Discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Hannon, aye.
Jarius, aye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Von Mering, aye. Motion passes 5-0. Favorable action. Recommendation of favorable action on petition number 3929 for 6 Winslow Road. Just to go back, a more point of order that Brian noted as well, 201 Ridge Street, were any of the owners here on that property?
Well, we recommended favorable action, so I think we're fine.
Okay. I just
Agreed.
want to
Agreed.
make a recommendation to move it back slightly. So I just want to make sure if they were here, if they had a question of us, that would be available. All right, let's move on to, we have 8 minutes to our hearing. We can start Washington Swanton and we can continue that discussion after the hearing. Let me switch gears and pull up my RFP that I have my notes in.
So I had a bunch of comments. I did read this pretty closely. Can we just jump in?
You just want to rattle them off? And
Yeah, so page
if there's any we
4.
can agree with.
On page 4, it describes how there was at the bottom, I guess if Brian can scroll down to page 4. And you'll have to push in town just redevelopment, that paragraph, yes. So where it ends with 2019, what it says is that a previous proposal that was opposed by the neighbors, that was CVS, but a subsequent mixed use project including was well received at a community meeting. Well, I was there, so were you, Heather, so was Heather Hannon. I don't know who else was there, but 3 of us were. I would like to add the design was not reviewed by the planning board and it should not be construed as promoted in this RFP.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I was also going to, in the same section before you proceed to, I agree with that, Maureen, is that says the CVS pharmacy was opposed by neighbors and a previous proposal. It was a previous application for redevelopment. I think the language in here should be corrected and was appealed, and it wasn't just the neighbors. So I think it should just say was appealed due to the 2 reasons. One was parking, and it was correct. The appeal was found to be accurate. So due to parking, and I can't remember, there's one other thing that the courts found it to be.
It was the zoning line, where the zoning line for the district was in the middle of the street. And
yeah, I think in this instance, we should not be vague, because they're making it sound like the neighbors were just opposed. The neighbors had reason to be opposed to this. It didn't meet the zoning laws. And so it's not that some of them were in favor of the CVS, they just weren't in favor of certain components of it that went, the parking issues and stuff that they had mentioned. So, and it's not just the neighbors. So I think the neighbors should be taken out of it, because they keep getting stigmatized by this. I don't think it's fair to them either. And it's not a universal, all the neighbors. So I think we should just clarify that up and tighten that up to be actually more factual based as well. So when I reviewed that, that's what I saw on this page. Maureen, you can keep going. I just figured since you're on this
so
page.
Let's page 5. It's nowhere in here does it say. So let's do design considerations on page 5. We're not there yet, unless I have a lag. Am I?
The lag's there.
Are we there?
Yep. You can go ahead into it.
It's just a little slow here, but it's coming up. Anyway, design considerations, the paragraph, the Washington and Swanton property is fine. And then let's see, if you actually are looking down, oh, okay, it's a very long second sentence. Zoning relief will be necessary, fine. And should expect to work collaboratively with abutters, town staff, and boards. And then insert, please, including the planning board and design review committee. It's not inaccurate. It's just which are the boards. And I think these 2 boards need to be called out to make sure that it's on the record that these are 2 boards that will be given, that will be working on this project.
So it's just planning and design review boards?
It just including, if you think there's some that are so obvious, like engineering, that, I mean, they have legal rights, whereas this should be just really clear that there's boards are going to count. If you have something else, but I don't think we need to list every one that has a very clear legal role, but ours is advisory in this case.
We should include disability access.
Okay. But again,
And
legally, you can't really build a building that doesn't comply with ADA. So you just can't.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll do that.
if you look
Okay,
at
but put it in, fine. I don't object. Let's keep going.
Okay.
Before you move out of this paragraph, Maureen, I'd like it to say a historical residential neighborhood. They are in a historical neighborhood. They even talk about how the historical site itself. The other thing, when I was looking at our center business district for the next agenda item, it really, the design considerations is that the building should have a tripartite, a base, a middle, and a top to it. It shouldn't just be a big 3-story block. So it should have articulation to it. And I think it'd be important just to note that we don't have to define too much to leave them more room for design.
Heather, that's actually already in the design guidelines.
All right, you don't want it specifically called out in the design considerations?
No, I'm just merely pointing out it exists. If you want it, I thought my understanding was, yeah, go ahead. If you want it there, that's fine.
I get what you're saying, but the problem is this is going for zoning relief. So they're coming in under friendly 40B, so they can supersede all of our local zoning.
But it's in, okay, the design, okay, so there's the whole section on design, which is attached to this, includes that language. So
yes,
that's all I'm saying. But you want it in there twice. That's fine.
To draw emphasis to it, but we can, if you feel it's enough, let's keep going.
No, it's fine. I just was pointing out it was in there. I didn't know if you realized it was already in there. That's all. Thanks.
It's not, but I mean, design considerations are in there. There is an appendix. It's great if it's in 2 places, but I want to make sure page 7, it's the same concept. Selection process. And under selection process, and again, I'm not keeping up maybe as quickly as you are on your screen. Well, I've got the RFP, so I'm there, I think. Scroll down a little more. Thank you, Brian. Under selection process, zoom in, and it's paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, where it begins one public. It's right now at the bottom of my screen, but one public. Can you get in close up there? Yep, oh, good, thank you. We're there. So there where it says the last sentence and the one public is the beginning of the paragraph, the last sentence, the select board will also collect feedback from local boards and committees, including the planning board, design review committee, and housing partnership board. I did wonder, you can put disability commission, that's fine. But I also thought TTAC might have a place here. So those are the ones I'd like to see. Brian, are you taking notes, or this is being recorded so you'll go back over it? And Nancy, of course, is backing you up.
All 3 of those, yep.
Yep, so we're good. So let's just keep moving.
All right, well, our hearing's going to start in a minute, so I'd like to pause there. I also have a big caveat going on with this RFP that I want to address, so that we can't do in the next minute. So let's come back to it. Can you hold right there? We're on page 8. We'll come back to this after our hearing.
Yeah, very quickly, I would say that if everyone has comments written down already, we can just give we can just give those comments.
No.
I would like it to come from the full board to those recommendations. So I'll come out of the whole board if that's, and then.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss some things as well.
So I would like to come back to this, and maybe this will be at the 9:30 time slot for the 30 minutes, but I think there is more. I have my own notes as well that I want to go over to discuss. And also, I think this is something we don't want to just push forward.
So just as a point, I see Dennis is here, which is great. And this, of course, Dennis has more than a little interest in this too. We're all working together. So I guess we're going to, somehow I want to make sure that we don't, I can't even remember the agenda, sorry, but we're going to segue into a place where we can bring Dennis in as well.
Sounds good. So if Dennis can stay after the hearing for a little bit, if you're able to, Dennis, and then join us for continuation of agenda item for Washington Swanton RFP.
Yes, I would like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. All right, we are on schedule. It is 8:01. I am going to quickly move some papers around. We are very heavy in paper today. So I'm going to welcome the public to the hearing of the Winchester Planning Board. For everyone who is here, typically, if you were in person with us, we would be signing a piece of paper, and that would be your sign in. As it's Zoom, you all signed in and with your participant's name, which shows up in our list. So we'll be documenting who's here based on that. I believe, yep, everyone has their names up. Thank you so much for identifying your name so that we are taking that as your sign in. Just so everyone knows, this meeting is being recorded by WinCam. Thank you very much. WinCam does broadcast us also on their channel, and there's a recording of this meeting will also be available on their website. The purpose of this public hearing is a continuation of the hearing for 648, 654 Main Street and 63 Vine Street. This is an application for a new construction project at the current location of the Fells Hardware store. It also is for a special permit and site plan review under the authority of the special permit granting authority of the planning board, which is who we are. I'm Heather Von Mering. I'm the chair. We started pretty abruptly at this meeting, so we didn't go around and introduce ourselves, but I'm Heather Von Mering, the chair of the planning board. Along with me is Deb Jirius, the vice chair, but also the secretary according to the regulations of the state law. We also have Maureen Meister, Cheryl Wolf, and Heather Hannon. You will also be seeing a handful of other members who are here of our staff. We have Brian Zucchelli, the town planner. Beth Rudolph is the town engineer. And then there are also consultants that have been brought in as independent on this project to support our review and provide us feedback that's independent. There are rules of this hearing, and today we're specifically focusing on allowing the public to ask questions of the board and the applicants. So I want to make sure that we follow these rules pretty clearly. When you begin to speak, please state your name, company, and address if applicable. Please direct your comments and questions to me as the chair. And you come to the table in the Zoom way with unmuting yourself when you're called upon. And then when you're done and your time is up, please mute yourself, and that returns you back to your seat. I have the right to exclude irrelevant material or repetitive information, and I expect that everyone maintains decorum. And if you are unruly for any reason, you will be asked to leave or booted out by our host of the Zoom meeting. Today, I'm going to introduce the applicant, actually the applicant of record, which we actually don't talk about very often, but the applicant of record is Kevin Ryan. But there is a development team that actually has been mainly the people who come before the planning board, and you'll probably be hearing from them in responses to your question. We have Ted Talukian, the architect, along with a large group of development team, mainly led by Ian Gillespie. We have received many communications which have been posted online and available. The board has been reviewing all those communications as they come in. Also, the consultants have received all of that communication for their review as part of their process. The applicant also has been receiving a copy of those as well. We have a new set of plans that was delivered to the planning board. We received them on Friday and have reviewed them for this meeting. And we also have been reviewing all the comments from boards and commissions as they review this application, and have those as well as part of our review. So to start off, I'm going to have, we are now at the point where we're going to go to public comment. Before that though, Dennis Carlone in our last meeting asked for a brief 5 minutes to quickly give an overview of his overview of the zoning laws. Along with that, Brian Zucchelli, also the town planner, reviewed the whole application as it currently stands and provided a memo. I'm going to give Brian first the chance to speak real quick to give his overview of the application and his recommendations to the planning board. And then we'll go to Dennis, and then we will open it up. Brian, if you'd like to kick it off.
Sure. So I'm just going to kind of try to go through this kind of quick in terms of a snapshot of where we are compared to our last time. So a number of different issues have come up that the first issue that was street trees. So I've been in touch with Julie Riemenschneider of the Design Review Committee regarding their meeting on the project and the conditions related to the street trees. They said that, Julie Riemenschneider said that structural soils under the sidewalk should be installed and permeable pavers in the narrow strip next to the curb if the DVW is comfortable with maintaining. So that's talking about vacuuming and sweeping these permeable pavers. So that seems like it's a question that could be, it's still lingering. That would be still approved by DVW and engineering. Large trees should be used that are either broad or columnar and approved by DPW as well. And they should maintain these street trees for at least 1 to 2 years. It's unclear if it's going to be sprinklered, so that's one quick question. The affordable units, a snapshot of that, I think it actually makes most sense a little bit later. John Serbier of the Housing Partnership Board is here, and I think that I know that he's been in touch with Rieko Hayashi at the Department of Housing and Community Development, and has conversation. It can highlight some conversations that happened even today and certainly yesterday. I'm going to keep moving here. So 63 Vine Street. So the list of conditions from John Clemson, as well as the rest of the Historical Commission, those were all incorporated into the initial submission, and they're in my memo. SSV is still planned not to begin work until the demolition, or just before the demolition phase, for coordination and study. In my most recent memo, all I did was put in those list of conditions that have already been agreed upon by the applicant at the time of application. So scale, massing, and height as this relates to resident feedback. So we've consistently heard from abutters that the scale, massing, and height of the proposed building is out of character with the neighborhood. I believe Dennis has addressed this and may address this further, but the current zoning for the site contemplates larger structures than what's proposed. And additionally, the existing multifamily buildings at 35 Vine, known as Stonehenge Apartments, as well as at 2 Elmwood Ave, are consistent with size or even larger than the current building. So the project is heavily screened at 666 Main Street. This is adjacent to the site. And it's used an example of a building that's set back from the street and therefore less imposing. But it has parking on the first level, which wouldn't be allowed under current zoning, and is over 200 feet long at 4 to 4.5 stories. What I'm trying to say here is that it's clear that 666 Main Street is more out of character with the town center than what the zoning actually contemplates. The design review and the historical commission will have a full chance to review the updated package before our next meeting, and we'll give comments based upon this February 9th submission. Neither groups have raised concerns about the scale, massing, and the height of the first submission back in October, and it has gotten smaller in size. The flooding and stormwater. So Conservation Commission at the moment has minimal concerns, but there have been issues that have been raised with respect to the Wetlands Protection Act and the Winchester Wetlands Bylaw, and those are being worked out with VHB, the consultant that's been hired. So we will kind of defer to the flooding and stormwater management plan that will be contingent upon the Conservation Commission's order of conditions. I think I'll stop there and let Dennis kind of talk about some of the updates design-wise from our last time. Dennis, if I can bring some pictures up here, if you can just guide me if you'd like.
Well, why don't I give an overview first, Brian? The latest submission is truly a series of refinements, some pretty subtle refinements. And I have to say that this development team has constantly refined their design after each meeting, depending on input from the planning board, to the point that I've never had that occur before. I looked at the most recent set, and as I said, it's very similar, but with improvements at each time to try to reflect what the planning board had said or some of my comments. I wanted to say, just to give an overview, that I started working in Winchester in 2012, and we worked on Waterfield, the Waterfield lot, and then we worked on Main Street, and then we worked elsewhere, working with other architects to develop a strategy, which was totally based on the town's preferences and thoughts for downtown. The resulting zoning very much reinforced that and was approved by the planning board. And this building very much reflects that. Now, whenever you have single family and 2-family and 4-family housing next to apartment buildings, of course, there's a change in scale. But that is both the plan and what the zoning dictated. To the developer's credit, they modified, it's a 2-step, actually a 3-step complex. The historic house, of course, what they refer to as the mercantile building, the building you see in the front here, which reflects and borders Main Street, and then a similar mass, except the roof is carved into a very traditional roofscape to be more domestic in scale and less Main Street scale, as Brian is showing here. But it also takes advantage, hold that view, it also takes advantage, if you go back to the view that was just there, to the more than 10-foot difference in the grade between Vine Street behind in this view and the area that the new building is built on, Elmwood Avenue and Lower Vine, if you will. I understand the concern of neighbors, but when you propose apartment buildings in the downtown next to single and multifamily wood-framed housing, this is the intersection. And quite frankly, this is one of the best projects in my 50-year practice that I've seen that tries to mitigate that. Now, you can easily say, but the setback should be more. Well, as I wrote in my review document, my design for this area had 5 stories on Main Street and less behind, but the planning board pretty much said 4 stories is the max. I went with that as a rule, and this is the result. I think it's a very handsome, sympathetic building. No, it is not all wooden structures next to the existing wooden structures, but there is the historic house, there is the courtyard. I think it's an excellent solution and really handsomely tries to reflect the design standards. Even though I helped write them, they are some of the best and very strong design standards I've ever seen for towns of this scale, which was all about fitting in. And even though it's a different scale, being as humanistic as possible. I'm happy to answer further questions or respond to comments, but that is my feeling.
Thank you, Dennis. John Serbier of Housing as well wanted to speak to us, to the planning board. I think maybe it'd be beneficial to have him give his update now before we go into Q&As. John, are you here?
Yep, I'm here.
All right, if you would like to give the planning board an update, and if you had questions of the applicant or of us, please let me know.
Okay. An important element of this proposal is the income limited housing that will be provided as part of this development. This housing will serve essentially moderate and middle income families, starting with incomes at about in the $65,000 to $70,000 a year range. Over the past few weeks, or even several weeks, we've had numerous conversations with the development team, as well as with the Department of Housing and Community Development. These conversations have been cooperative, they've been positive, they've led to a lot of improvements in there. And let me just quickly summarize the key criteria. In terms of the number of affordable units, the original proposal was for 5 units. We pointed out that the zoning actually calls for a total of 6 units, 4 serving the 80% median income level, 2 serving the 120% median income level. The developer has agreed to provide 6 units. So the current proposal, as was submitted on Friday, is consistent with the town's zoning. In terms of the bedroom mix, this was another important criteria. In the development, there's an equal number of 2-bedroom units and 1-bedroom units, 17 of each, and 2 3-bedroom units. The original proposed affordable housing had an equal number of 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms. The Department of Housing and Community Development asked to have the 2-bedroom units increased from 3 to 4 so that these units would better serve the needs of families with children. The developer has agreed to that. In terms of floor area size, the DHCD criteria is that the size of the affordable units be proportional to those of the market rate units. The initial proposals we concluded were on the small side. They have made, I think, 2 different modifications to increase the floor area size of the income restricted units. And when I spoke with DHCD staff this morning, they did not express any concern with the floor area size. So that's acceptable to them. In terms of location, the units, there are 2 units each on levels 2, 3, and 4. So that is acceptable to DHCD on that. Further, the units are distributed with some facing Main Street, some facing Elmwood, and some facing the courtyard. So that's acceptable to the Housing Partnership Board and to DHCD. The one remaining issue is that if you look at the individual floors, there's a concern that the affordable units may be too close to one another as opposed to being distributed over the floor. And we're having conversations with both the development team on that. They have made some modifications and some changes that I received at 4 o'clock this afternoon and I've taken a quick look at, but haven't looked at it in any detail. And I think that both the Housing Partnership Board and DHCD will look at that in more detail. One technical point that came out of the last meeting was that one of the affordable units on level 2 is located immediately above the entrance to the parking garage. And the suggestion was made by Tool Design to include an audible sound alarm on the exit for vehicles exiting from the lift. And I asked that the level of that sound be such that it not carry into either the affordable units or any other residential units on levels 1 and 2. And the development team has agreed to check into that. In commercial spaces, these alarms can be fairly loud. You don't want that same level in a residential space. And so that's a detailed design that has to be worked on. So in summary, DHCD is very much satisfied. We want to check and refine the spacing and the location of the units on the 3 floors. I'd also point out that DHCD understands that there are trade-offs among the criteria in terms of the floor area size, the location of the units, and as background, in 3 recent projects including Greystone, 15 Dick Street, and Winning Farm, none of those strictly adhere to DHCD guidelines, and they were willing to understand the trade-offs, and particularly in getting larger units sometimes for a less than ideal location. And I'm comfortable that on this project, in my conversations with Rieko Hayashi, and she's working with her their legal counsel office, that they will be understanding and, will be able to reach agreement. Normally, this is actually getting into more detail in depth than we normally do on past projects or have in past projects. But it's worthwhile to gain that level of agreement. To conclude, I just want to kind of iterate the Housing Partnership Board position. We followed, a number of members and have followed this project in detail. We've discussed it in our own meetings. The proposed design is consistent with the applicable CBD zoning, as Dennis Carlone and Brian as well has described. I agree with Dennis that the developer team has been incredibly responsive to the requests made by the planning board, by the peer review consultants, by other town boards and the neighbors as well. And I think we need to acknowledge that. The current design, the Housing Partnership Board feels the current design would be a very valuable and strong addition to the town center. And we highly recommend that the planning board approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Diab, you had a question for John that you put to everyone in the chat. There are people who are here on the phone who can't see the chat, so we need to make sure that all questions are spoken out loud. So Diab asked John in the chat, any discussions yet on the HOA and how the affordable units are represented? Do you want to elaborate more on that, Diab?
No, I know that at some point when we get to the condo association or the HOA, there's always a question on whether they get full votes or partial votes. And there are other things like, what are the prices for the parking units? And I was just wondering if we were yet at a stage where that's part of the discussion, or is that going to come up later?
That's generally is addressed later. On the parking, thank you for bringing that up. The developers have agreed, if the parking is unbundled from the condominium fee, they have nonetheless agreed to essentially, quote, reserve one parking space for each of the affordable units. The charge for that parking space, but the charge for the condominium fee is prorated in terms of the ratio of the sale price of the affordable unit to the market rate unit. The parking price would be prorated in the same amount, in the same.
What if?
In the same percentage. In terms of voting rights, the desire, DHCD's desire, the Housing Partnership Board's desire, is that the owners of the affordable unit would have equal voting rights to those of the market rate units.
Will brothers have voting rights?
Okay, I think we've got a Zoom bomber.
Brian, can you please kick him out?
He's already out.
Thank you.
Oh, I think he was asking, will brothers have voting rights?
Please take out John and Suzanne, please, as well.
I'm just trying to help here. I'm not trying to be a nuisance or anything.
Please keep yourself muted. If you do it again, you'll be taken out of the meeting. Thank you, John. Any members have any questions for John before we proceed? All right, sounds good. All right, so let's open it up to the public. If you'd like, how we usually identify, if you would like to speak, is you raise your hand, and then I will call on you. You direct your questions to me. Each member will be given 3 minutes each, and then the questions will be addressed, and we'll go to the next person straight on down the line. If you are on the phone and you are unable to raise your hand, once I've gone through everyone who's raised their hand, I will then open it up to those who are on their phones to chime in at that point. So going to all of the participants, I'll give you a moment to raise your hands if you have any questions of the board or of the applicant. And please raise your hand.
We'll do sorry to interrupt, Heather, just a few things. So one, yes, you use the raise your hand function. You can also use the chat function to me if you wanted to document your question. And then once we go through the first the people with their hand raised and then through any chat, then we'll open up to anybody who's calling in. So that'll take care of everybody. If it's all right with you, Heather, I'll start calling on people and letting them speak. I see the first one was Katie Scott. If you want to unmute yourself and go right ahead.
Good morning. Good evening. Where am I? Okay, so I'm going to try to fit this into 3 minutes. I find this project very exciting and hope that it goes through. Before the housing expert leaves, I wanted to ask about, I also noticed the clustering in the last plan of the affordable units next to each other or kitty corner. That's a little bit concerning. And then I noticed that none of the affordable units had a deck, like a large deck. There was one, I think, that had a little Juliet balcony, but I don't know if that is a criteria to, spread the amenities to the 4 units. Should I wait for an answer or just keep going?
Are those the only questions you had, or did you have other?
No, I had some comments about the mercantile building.
Do you want to give your comments and then I will go to the questions?
Okay, for the mercantile building, I found that the building spans the entire block, and I think that the best opportunities to activate or to make it something that is very captivating or attractive would be the 2 corners, right? So the Main and Vine corner, I find, seems to have the scale, should be the public face of the gateway, as the architect had explained. From the scale of a car or across the street. It's sort of the viewpoint to see the building as you come into town. So in that corner, I find that so there are balconies on the corners, and I kind of repeating what Cheryl had said in the last meeting. I think the balconies do provide a very casual, maybe a little bit too casual. The decks seem to attract a lot of, grills and furniture, and that scale seems to me not the proper way to present the building. And I find that the other corner on Elmwood, and that very straight, brick facade seems to speak more to what that corner is trying to say, if that makes sense. And even from an interior perspective, as a user, I think that having a deck facing west towards the courtyard would be a more attractive location. I think that the other corner, yes, this corner on Elmwood seems to be not taking advantage of its location, which is it could be a place of activation. And, I think of the quality of space at Thompson and Main. I think that the right in front of Starbucks is the most active corner, I think, in Winchester, and it's a destination. And it has a feel to it that is placemaking, whereas this, I think that it has the potential to do that, especially with asking the town to widen that sidewalk. It could really become an active space for people to come from both corners. And should the building across the street get developed, an invitation to make that even more of a spaciousness for the entire community, rather than just a consumer who has to buy coffee to enjoy that space. And I think just design-wise, that corner with the beginning of the ramp as well as the bike racks seems to provide a very physical and visual barrier to entry. And if that were to switch, where the patio area and maybe start the ramp further in, it could really free up that corner and sort of have a public-private space with the widened sidewalk that the town might put in for the cross, and be a very lovely, streetscape. I do question that front, the cafe front, especially with the, using an entire bay as stairway into the cafe. It seems like it's maybe perhaps 20 feet or so. It just seems like a loss of use to go under an overhang, to go up onto an elevated plinth and then be under an overhang and then open the doors to a cafe seems a little bit too delayed. And then to exit and enjoy that outdoor space, you too have to go through that sequence in order to sit. And I think that bay, using the second bay as the sitting spot, hides it from, from Elmwood, from coming up. It's behind the column. So activating that corner with, a freed up space, and then the other corner with switching the patio would be my comments.
Thank you. I was just about to tell you got time. So going from there, I'm going to direct her questions to John Servier regarding the clustering of the units in regards to decks. Are you reviewing the units for based on the equal distribution of those with balconies? John, if you'd like to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Heather, are you asking me a question?
Yeah. When you reviewed it, did you take into consideration the locations and which ones have balconies and which ones do not?
Which ones have what?
Balconies.
Oh, balconies. I looked at that once, but I have not looked at it recently.
Okay.
If Ian Gillespie is on the call, maybe he can answer that, or Ted Tulukian.
I think it is, it's more a comment to you to take a look at that. And if there's an issue to.
Yeah, there's at least one of the units has a balcony or a deck.
Yeah, and I believe the community member was asking specifically if that is equally distributed throughout the building, that there's equal to decks or the balconies. All right, onward to the next. I believe, Brian, you're keeping track of who's in order. So I'll let you.
Yeah, so it's going to Marcia, and then Lucy Zhang, and then Lance Grensbach, and then that's it for the moment. But please keep going. So Marcia, the floor is yours.
You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marcia. I do live in the neighborhood, so my plea is more emotional. And listening to this meeting, I feel like everyone's pretty happy checking off boxes for the wish list of Winchester and putting them all in this one building on what is a pretty small lot. And it is being covered, I would ask, at what percentage? How much of the lot size is covered? Is it 90%, 95%? Because as a neighbor, it feels like it's 100% when I look at it from the different angles and as a person who will walk by it all the time. I'm curious how many of you live downtown, how many of you live under these guidelines that everyone votes for but tends not to be impacted by. I'm curious, as you're increasing the size of the unit bedrooms from 2 to 4, how many cars are you looking at? And how many cars do you have in your household? If these units have teenagers, how many cars are we now looking at? And where are you going to put them? We're a small neighborhood. We're already impacted by commuters, by workers from downtown, by shoppers. I don't know where you're going to put all these people, especially if you're not giving them 2 spots per unit. And it doesn't sound like it. You check off traffic is not an issue. That's very funny. Pre-COVID, try and drive past Fells Hardware when the high school is getting out or there's a drop-off or any activity downtown. You check off flooding, not an issue. I dare you to talk to my neighbor Maureen down the street, who within the 10 years we've lived here saw her house flood, and she's at a higher level than what Fells is. I really need you to stop and think. It's more than just on paper zoning. It's people you're impacting. And I just can't believe you're going to walk down the street and look up at this 4-story building and go, wow, I improved Winchester. Where do you see that downtown? People go to Starbucks because you can sit outside, enjoy the trees, the smaller scale. So I just really ask you, are any of you living under these conditions? Do any of you have one car or less? And you're really expecting that to all take place in this one building? That's it. I know you've already made your decisions from what I'm hearing, but I don't think you're listening to the neighborhoods.
Thank you, Marcia. Brian, would you like to provide the answer of how much percentage coverage of on the lot, along with how many cars are parking in this inside the complex? Or actually, as well, Ted, you may be able to answer it as well.
I was gonna actually give it to the applicant.
Sure, I can answer a couple of those questions.
So this is Ted Taluki, and this is the architect of record on the project.
Thank you, Chair. So the question was the percentage of coverage on the lot. In our application, we have a calculation that shows 25% of the lot has open space to the sky, which translates to 75% lot coverage, not 90%.
I'd like to know the footprint of the building to the lot size, not open to air. Because you could be talking about rooftop or balconies. I would like to know the footprint on the lot.
That is approximately the lot coverage of the footprint of the building is 75% of the lot size. I can get you that calculation. I don't have it at my fingertips at this moment. Brian, we can send that to you if that's helpful. Or if you wait, we can calculate that. Hold on.
Ted, if you want to come back to that, we can grab that from you, the square footage of the overall of the building. But do you have the number of car parking spaces?
Yes. So we are working with our vendor, and we are showing currently 36 to 41 automated parking spots, and that will be within that range.
And Brian, in terms of the parking, I can grab it as well. I just need to pull it up. Do you know off the top of your head, there's a minimum and a maximum requirement?
The minimum requirement in this area is 0.75 spaces per unit. You would need a waiver to go below that. They're giving either one or just over one space per unit. So they are fine with that provision.
Thank you, Brian. Who is next on the list? And
Chair, excuse me, I do have the calculation for you if you'd like the square foot area. The GSF of the building footprint is with including the balcony projection is 13,331 square feet.
And is anyone going to answer if they live under these restrictions or have 0.7 cars for their units? Otherwise, thank you. And I wish you'd really consider the neighbors.
You're asking the planning board if any of us live within the center business district? Members of the planning board? I live in precinct 8. I directly abut commercial building and commercial property. Other members of the planning board?
I live in precinct 8. I'm 1 block off of Main Street by Gloria's Pizza.
I'm in precinct 3 and I am not in the center.
I'm not in the center.
Precinct 3. And I think the question is, do we live with these under the zoning? The answer is no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question.
Next question is from Lucy, or comment, Lucy Zhang. Why don't you unmute and go right ahead?
Okay, hi. I think everybody knows me. I'm the neighbor lives on 51 1 Street, exactly close to the building that is designed on this presentation. I'm opposed to the whole design. The thing is, I'm asking everyone in the planning board, have you guys lived in my building for 1 day during all this construction? Anyone? And consider this is the construction facing my kitchen. Then this is another construction that will last long forever. I don't know how long. So I just asking politely, have anyone living in my house, or I invite every one of you to live in my house for one whole day when the construction is going on. Because this new design totally block my view, will depreciate my house, influence my whole life. And also, I agree with the neighbors. It's a small neighborhood. I know the town is booming the CBD, but it's not sacrificing the neighborhood's benefit. Okay, I think the town should protect every resident's benefit. We pay the same kind of tax. I just don't understand. And also, you guys hold all this public hearing. I'm asking everyone, answer me one question. I have talked, emailed. Okay, what's my comment for? And what's my comment? There's no news for any of my comment. So can anyone answer me this question? Okay, if you do this kind of public hearing, then what's the use? Okay, that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Members of the planning board, did you have any comments in response? I actually have a question regarding this, Ted, that the tree and the screening that originally was in place that was on the last speaker's property has been removed. So there is no longer any landscaping screening between her property and the historical house. I would like to see that be looked into, since in the last conversations we've had, there's been discussion about that tree, but it is no longer there.
Yeah, that tree was, I understand, not on the property, but we can further evaluate screening along those edges.
Thank you.
Are you guys talking about my tree? They dropped it down to my car, hit my car, so I have to remove that both tree.
Yep. So that was removed, but what I'm asking for is them to look at, since that tree provided you some screening and it is no longer there, and it's now currently where it's at right now, is that they look at opportunities to screen on the land of their property with landscaping, since yours is gone. I'm going to move on to the next person online. Brian, who is that?
I just put it in the chat. It's going to go Lance Grensbeck, then Thomas Howley, John Stevens, Jamie Duvall. You can just keep raising your hand. Lance, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Heather. Having spent the last 15 years following and participating in the debates over how the town center should be treated, how it should be developed, I think what we have here emerging as a project I think is quite positive, and I would commend both the planning board and the developer for an awful lot of very difficult and detailed work to bring it to this point. I have two sets of comments for you. The first, several relating to design, the second set relating to the consistency with the town's policies for development of the center and development of the town as a whole. Under design, I note the style has, particularly of the building, the mercantile building on Main Street, has evolved. It reminds me now somewhat of the Boot Mill in Lowell. Many years ago, I worked on the urban cultural park plan there, and this is quite reminiscent of it. It does match somewhat the building we have at 620 Main Street, so it provides some consistency on the area. I do think the building looks more residential than the previous versions, and I think that's a positive aspect of it. There's been very intense discussions, not just over this project, but of others in the town, over the appropriateness of the size, scale, massing, and height of the buildings. It's my personal opinion that we are looking at a size and site and massing now that's quite appropriate. I went back earlier today and dug out the notes we'd taken when the planning board first started looking at this issue, dating back in 2010. This area was in fact designated on the first blush to be 4 stories as appropriate. Beyond this, we kept it lower, but we've realized it is 4 stories, and I think that is appropriate for the area. I do have a suggestion on the design details that the architects and engineers take a very close look at their flood compensatory storage. It looks like a very elegant solution, but having spent some years worrying about the flood storage capacity pools at the hospital's 620 Washington site, which were never built, but one of the key questions came, how do you clean it out and deodorize it after it's flooded? It washes in all sorts of river debris, rats, junk mail, everything. I don't think that's a major issue, but you want to take a very close look eventually on how that area gets cleared out. On the more broader question of the consistency with the town's policies, I think we debated 15 years ago and 10 years ago where the focus of development ought to be in the town, and we recommended, and the town meeting voted in the end, that it ought to be in the center. And I think this project begins to attain that. It retains retail on the street front. It's very important to keep our retail businesses going. It provides housing, considerable amount of it. Provides affordable housing, which has been a key goal, prevent large, unmitigatedly big 300-unit projects from being developed in the neighborhoods. It brings that development and that housing near the transit-oriented development, the center, where we have bus service and rail service. And in this particular case, while it's tight, it provides off-street parking and shelters it, keeps it off the street. I think all of those are quite positive. I think the other thing that I would applaud the planning board and the developer for doing is basically responding to the needs of Winchester for the 21st century. We need to control and take proactive control of development and how the town's developing rather than being reactive. And I think this is a good first step. It's clearly one we will debate and want to make modifications to as we move to future projects. But I think this is a very positive example of what the town can and should be doing. The alternative is to let development roll over us in ways that are quite unproductive and unappreciated. And while change is always an irritant and a difficulty for some of us, I think as town as a whole will benefit from this project and others. So I would strongly recommend to the planning board that they advance this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lance. Lance had one question in there, which I'm wondering if I actually am interested in, well, as I haven't heard the answer to it, is how do you clean and freshen the water retention area?
This is Ted Slukian. Would you like me to answer that?
I'm just curious. Yes, I would like, that would be wonderful if you could answer that.
Sure. Well, a couple things that we will be looking at detailing those surfaces with antimicrobial materials and surfaces to aid with antibacterial and viruses in those areas, as well as we have hatch in the courtyard location, as well as openings that allow the ability to go into those areas and provide maintenance as needed. And the clearance in that will allow for maintenance staff to go in and take care of that maintenance itself.
Thank you, Ted. Next in line is Tom Hawley. Tom Hawley?
Yeah, hi, Heather.
Hello.
Hello, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to get a chance to add a few comments. I live in the town center. Nancy and I live in the town center, so we are, very aware of the, the retail environment and the, kind of vehicle and pedestrian environment. And I also was active in the town in a way that I was quite familiar with the emergence of the revisions to the town center zoning. And it seemed to me that, the sort of at the heart of it was really a vision about strengthening the vibrancy and the economy of the town center, to bring more housing density into the town center, to provide more affordable housing, and to do it in a way that that really protected the architectural character of this center that we valued the most. And when I think about those things that animated the discussions that we had so many years ago and all the hard work that was put into revising our town center business district zoning bylaws, it seems to me that this project, as you all have worked so hard on, the planning board, the town staff, the engagement of neighbors, that this project now, in fact, really does represent in many ways what we had in mind and what we'd hoped for, that the new zoning would in fact encourage and produce. So it seems to me that, and I won't, there are a lot of people on this call and the neighbors and others are commenting on the details of the project in a way that probably I would not add a great deal to, but it does seem to me as an overview that it preserves the retail that we wanted to do, that it does provide housing and importantly affordable housing, that although not perfect, it addresses off-street parking, and that it does so within a design that's appropriate to the historic architecture of the center. I know that many people would like to have a project of smaller scale, but I do think it's questionable whether a smaller scale project is financially feasible. And it does seem to me that the topography of the site diminishes its uphill impact. I know that a lot of this is subjective, but to me, and I care about this deeply, I live in a historic building within the center. It seems to me that the materials and the details of the elevations get close enough to really starting to imagine a 21st century look for the town center that feels and complements the 19th century architecture that we value so much. So my concern now is really that a lot of the things that motivated us at the time, the concerns we had about the vibrancy and economy of the center, if anything, they've become more challenged. And so I wonder if this kind of project, which through all of your hard work has now really, I think, emerged into something which is truly something of quality, and it can be a model, not just for other development in the center, but for other towns and communities, frankly, with a very responsive and qualified, capable development team. If this project doesn't go forward, I'm not certain exactly what will. And I think if it does not go forward, it will make future quality development less likely. And so I think that there's a yearning and an expectation that many people in town have that something really positive happened for the town center. And I think that this project, in fact, now meets that qualification. And I would really hope, I think it's time, and I would really hope that the planning board would soon be able to act to approve the project. So thank you very much for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. Moving onward to John Stevens. Mr. Stevens?
I am now unmuted. I hope I can be heard, Madam Chair.
I can hear you. You may proceed.
I'll even share a picture of me. It's difficult for me to know exactly where to start. As I understand it, Madam Chair, I am limited to 3 minutes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I have any number of questions for the folks who have already spoken, but I don't think they can possibly be crammed into 3 minutes. I will offer.
Mr. Stevens, your comments are 3 minutes. So if you have comments you want to give, if you want to go questions, we can go through that.
All right, thank you. First of all, with respect to Brian's comments about 35 Vine Street and 2 Elmwood, of course, he is correct that the heights of those buildings meet, presumably, or perhaps even exceed what is proposed for 654 Main Street. The difference between 654 and those buildings is the setbacks. There are significant setbacks on all sides, except for the, what I would say is the north side of 2 Elmwood. And as to that, of course, in the days that there were 2 houses on Elmwood, where now there stands 36 Elmwood, there was plenty of extra light for the building at 35 Vine Street. I'm tempted to recall what a former president said. What's the matter with Putin? What's the problem with 3 stories here instead of 4? There is a difference, which I have argued and which apparently the planning board agreed with, between the east side and the west side of Main Street in the so-called North Core. The higher structures belong on the east side of Main Street because on that side, you back up to the railroad tracks. On the west side, on the other hand, you back up to a residential neighborhood, and I believe we have a comment by, in fact, I'm sure we have a comment by Mr. Carlone to the effect, I'm sorry, borders a smaller scaled residential neighborhood. I think we can all agree. So why is it necessary to put 4 stories on this side of Main Street when it's clear that the other side is more, at least it is to me, that the other side is more appropriate? I'm glad to hear that the developer is willing to listen to what the planning board has said about the design of the building. From my perspective, the problem is not that, it is the height and it is the mass. I'm not sure I know the difference between mass and bulk, but I'm sure I will learn. There was a comment about wood. It's not made of wood. Well, that's not one of my concerns. I'm not worried about whether or not it has wood. I'm worried about the massing and I'm worried about the height. Both are inappropriate. Is there anyone sitting on the planning board who would state that the value of 51 Vine Street will not be diminished as a result of this construction? Now, I suppose it's a benefit because if the property is valued by the assessor at somewhat less than it is now, property taxes might go down. That would be a good thing. There are a number of sections of the zoning bylaw that appear to me to be relevant here. One is the purpose. We're keeping the small town character. This is not a small town building. This is more appropriate in Somerville. Any part of the perimeter of new development should be designed to complement and harmonize with adjacent land uses, including scale, density, bulk, and height. 7.3.17.4, height and bulk of buildings should be configured to minimize their visual dominance, the extent of cast shadows. Has there been a shadow study? The planning board seems to agree that the historical structure at 63 Vine will be heavily shaded. Has anyone suggested a shadow study? I would ask specifically Mr. Carlone whether he thinks that's appropriate. The height and bulk, again, of buildings should be configured because they affect bordering neighborhoods. New development is expected to avoid a monolithic appearance. It does say properties must maximize the hours of sunlight available to public open space. It doesn't say private residences, but one might think that that would be appropriate. The general standards for site plan review, protection and preservation of existing vistas and natural features, consistency with character and scale of surrounding building and neighborhoods. I don't know that anything could be plainer than that. I asked the planning board very specifically to limit this structure to 3 stories, as of course is permitted by right under the zoning bylaw. There are a couple of responses to comments made earlier. I think it was Mr. Howley who indicated that he wasn't sure that if this project did not go through, that maybe others would not. The thought that I have on that score is that I've heard the developer not heard him directly, but I've heard him quoted to say, I can't make enough money with 3 stories. I ask you folks to consider the presumed reduction in money-making capacity for 3 stories versus 4 against what happens to the folks at 51 Vine Street. The last comment I have is, as far as Mr. Grenzbach's comment, again, I heard somebody tell me, it's not direct from Mr. Grenzbach, that when the new bylaw was passed, there were some objections to this or that or something else. And Mr. Grenzbach was presumably heard to say, let's just pass this thing. If changes are needed, we will make them. Well, I'm sorry, I was asleep at the time. Now I know that changes are needed, and I expect to be back either with the planning board support or simply on my own before town meeting, asking for a change in the zoning between the east and west side of the building, west side of Main Street, excuse me. I think that's it for my comments. I have a number of questions.
Well, Mr. Stevens, I'm going to stop you there. Let's answer one of your questions. Mr. Carlone, about a shadow study. Are you concerned about the shadows on the property and those around?
Well, clearly, when there's an interface with apartment buildings and smaller buildings, there will be increased shadows. There was nothing on the site to speak of on a 1-story building. Yes, that is an issue. It's a given. A 3-story building would cast a shadow. The question is the degree of the shadow. So I agree there will be an issue. There's no question. Any new building would cast a shadow. Now you can say we want it less. This, again, my guidance is by zoning, by the overall downtown plan, and the direction of the planning board. I've already told you what my recommendation was, which was a taller building on Main Street, resulting in a lower building near the neighborhood. But it wouldn't be a lower building, it'd be a taller building on Main Street. That's what my urban design studies proposed.
Dennis, can you clarify, back in the day when you did your original studies, it was like a 5-story in the front, but it was still a 3.5 in the back. Which we currently have, right?
It was 3 and 3.5.
Okay. Mr. Stevens, did you have a question you'd like me to direct to someone?
Well, I'd really like you to direct it to all of the folks who have spoken in favor of this project. I think that's not going to be possible tonight. Maybe it would be on another occasion. And I would ask those members to respond to each of the quotes that I made, which are taken directly from the zoning bylaw, and then tell the rest of us, tell the community how this structure as proposed matches the aspirations set forth in the bylaw. I can certainly recite these sections. Brian has copies of what I sorted out, but I don't think we need to read them here. They're all available easily in the bylaw. I can certainly list the 4 sections that I have cited if folks want to take it down. I don't, again, I don't mean to be insulting at all. I just want people to be able to know what sections of the bylaw to which I refer.
Thank you. So the questions can be directed at the planning board, the applicant, and town staff, along with the consultants. The planning board will be doing our deliberation in our next meeting to go through a lot of the zoning and discussing if it does or does not meet those zoning laws and guidelines. So we'll be going through that in our next meeting. I would like to make sure we continue to have everyone who's here who would like to speak. I don't know if there's, Dennis has gone through his earlier, kind of going through some of those points as well. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak to that at this point? All right, so Mr. Stevens, you'll hear the planning board deliberate on that in our next meeting. And you'll hear from the planning board when we discuss that and go through the zoning and how it does or does not meet the zoning. Next was Jamie Duvall.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I have attended most of these public hearings, I believe, and I've spoken at several. And I just wanted to stand in solidarity with the neighborhood on the other side of the Congregational Church. I abut the Central Business District on Dick's Terrace, so I'm right on the other side of the church. And having listened to the public hearings, mass, height, scale have come up every time as the main concern of the neighborhood. And then we start talking about where the brick goes or, column details, balcony details. But it's like the big elephant in the room has been ignored. And so I just want to reinforce like what Marcia said. She apologized, said her comments were emotional. Maybe, but I actually think they're very objective. When I look at the drawings, I think, no, it doesn't belong to the small scale neighborhood up the hill. That Main Street is different from going up the hill. So yeah, I just think it's just too big and too massive, too ambitious for the site. I've said that before, including the parking, the solution to the parking. I also wanted to say it feels like people are thinking we need to do what is presented right here or something bad is going to happen. I have a feeling it's a 42B project people are fearing. But again, just to reiterate what John Stevens was getting at, I think we can keep a lot of the hard work, the detail, the good architecture, but make it smaller by removing a story. I don't think it has to be all or nothing, because so many refinements have been made, but no refinements have been made recently anyway to the massing. And I think not to just prolong this conversation, because I'm really reiterating what John Stevens has said, but looking at the bylaws, is this small town character? No. And Dennis Carlone used the word that I think it was his urban design knowledge. Winchester's not really an urban community. Our zoning bylaw is trying to keep our town feeling like a small town, and I think this building does not do it. I think reducing the scale would help a lot. Also, there's some talk about, there's tall buildings around it, there's bigger buildings around it, but generally those bigger buildings we're not so fond of, like 666 Main Street. I'm sure the people who live there love it, but it's not the prettiest building in town. I think people do feel it was a mistake. It's a little too big. Stetson Hall, everyone seems to like that. It's tall, but it has a tiny footprint, and it has 27 one-bedroom studio apartments. And it sits up on the hill. And one point I've made over and over, but maybe it doesn't count, is that the topography of Winchester is part of what makes Winchester, Winchester. And putting the taller buildings up on top of the hill and having lower buildings down in the valley accentuate the hills, and actually, I think, makes it more charming. I think even at one of the public hearings, someone brought up Marblehead, and it's like, whoa, Marblehead, like part of the charm of Marblehead are the hills with the little buildings climbing the hills, and we're just totally obliterating that and filling in the topography. So, but mostly I just want to say, I think a lot has been crammed on the site. I think the architects did an amazing job doing it, But I don't think this has to be an all or nothing decision, that it can be scaled back. And I really, really think listening to the neighbors is the right thing to do, and not telling people, oh, this is a good design, like you should like it, because it's in their backyard. And yeah, but thank you all for your volunteer time. I don't know how you do it. And that's, I guess, all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Next up is Craig. Is it Rabe or Raby?
Robbie.
My apologies. Go ahead, Robbie, Mr. Robbie.
Hi, thank you very much. I don't live in the neighborhood, and I do understand the neighbors' concerns with the building. I would probably have the same myself if I was in their shoes. From Main Street, I think the building looks great. And this is the kind of building that Winchester's been looking for a long time. And I know one of the concerns that Winchester has had is more affordable housing in town. And this addresses that issue. And it also addresses bringing more people closer to public transportation. So people can come downtown and shop locally and keep our downtown vibrant without having to drive downtown. They also don't have to drive to the train station to take the train into town. So it meets a lot of those standards. And unfortunately, I think with the town's desire for having affordable housing, it does require a larger footprint. And that's just kind of the circumstances of the times. So, as much as 3 stories would be nice to make affordable housing a reasonable solution in town, the 4 stories seems to be necessary. And I think, unfortunately, the scale is required to allow more affordable housing. And unfortunately, we're going to see more projects like this if we want anything developed to accommodate the affordable housing. So, people can have some complaints about it. I understand them, but I think this is exactly what the town's looking for. I love the idea of keeping the retail on the street. It's great to keep Fell's Hardware in the same location and keep it in town for a long time. There's not a lot of downtown hardware stores anymore. That's a great resource for town. And also having a cafe there or something like that helps extend the retail out. And right now what's there for Fell's is not a good looking property. So I know this is big, but this will be a nice improvement of what we have right now downtown. So I think this will only add to the downtown. In terms of property values, our property values have gone up so much in the last 5 years, way more than I ever thought. I really can't imagine this hurting the property values, especially looking at the property that's currently there now. So, it only enhances the downtown. It is large, but I think that's part of the sign of the times. And unfortunately, that's something that is needed to accomplish the things that we want to in town for Winchester. So I emulate or agree with a lot of things that Tom Holly said. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Craig. Moving onward to MJ English.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Heather. I am a neighbor. I live on Wedge Pond Road. I object to the massing as it reminds me, quite frankly, of the rental units on Comm Ave in Alston Brighton. The town of Winchester isn't an urban environment, as Jamie Duvall stated. From Vine Street, where I walk daily, there's a view of the clock tower downtown. Interestingly, Craig Rabe just had that in the backdrop of his Zoom call. I will no longer be able to see that from Vine Street. It will be completely occluded, as will the hills in the background. So from an economic standpoint, from my point of view, that reduces the desirability of being in this neighborhood. I also have a question about the economic price points of the units that will be in this building. I'd like to know what the price points will be for each of the 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units that are in the plans that are producing the profit for the developer. And I'd also like to know whether or not there will be a requirement that they're owner occupied. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. To the applicant, there were 2 points of questions. The first one being the price points of the 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units that are going out for sale. As of this point, obviously. Is there a member of the development team who would like to answer that?
Would that have been addressed to me? It's Ian Gillespie.
Yes, Ian, I believe it might be for you. I didn't want to delegate who should answer it, but I believe it might be you who can do it.
No, I appreciate that. I'd love to have my partner's answer. But the answer is actually at this point, we don't know, to be candid. This building is probably at least 2 years away from being built and occupied. We're in a pandemic at the moment. We know that things change overnight. So the answer is we don't know. They will be market rate for the market rate units. We do know that today the affordable units, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Winchester is based on Boston. Is that correct? For affordable? John,
that is correct. The Boston AMI. That's correct.
Right, Boston AMI. So that's online. Folks can look that up for the affordable. So they will be, the market rate will be market rate. We don't know what that is.
So my question is, what is it that you guys are using for your modeling in order to determine the economic feasibility of the project?
Well, I wish I could tell you I had a specific answer to that, but to be completely candid, we don't know. We haven't had approval for a project yet. So we are looking at what we have. We have a very complex project. It is not inexpensive to build, as I'm sure you know, and Dennis will know very well, as will Ted. There's a tremendous amount of articulation. There are a lot of quality details here. So we have a sense that we're in Winchester. We know roughly where the market is today. We don't know where the market's going to be 2 years from now. But we do feel as though there is, we will make a profit. I don't think we'll make an extraordinary profit. Right now, we're trying to figure out what it is we have and how it'll end up. I'm not trying to evade the issue. We have a building directly next door, which I'm sure your fellow townspeople would tell you has not sold as condominiums as rapidly as we would have thought. That was priced at somewhere around $950 or $1,000 a foot. But we don't have a lot of sales there, so we're waiting to see what happens with the markets in general. We don't know if that is related to an elevated building in a COVID environment. We think it is, but we need another 6 months to determine what shakes out there.
Mr. Gillespie, there was another question about for you. Oh, are they going to have to be owner occupied? Have you determined that?
We haven't. We have not determined that. We don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Anne Marie Braco. If I pronounce your name wrong, my apologies.
Hi. Yeah, it's Bracco, but that's okay. Hi, everyone. I live at 23 Elmwood, Suite A. So I'm actually above Brugger's Bagels, so you know exactly where I live. When we moved to Winchester, I guess like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I thought this was like the ideal kind of co-op housing with business downstairs, residents above. It's not overwhelming. They have everyone has their own parking. We don't interfere with each other and we get along. These much huger buildings, you know, I don't understand like the scale because I just feel like it doesn't fit in with this business resident type of ideal environment that we have. I mean, to me, this is much more like Lexington. And that's the way I thought the town was going. Then I was kind of surprised to see the condominium building go across the street, you know, not apartments, but the condominium building that has not sold all yet. You know, we have sold. We're, you know, all resident occupied. We have 5 units here. Now, the reason I mention it is just because it's really residents and business living together. When I see like the scale that's down there, I mean, not having a setback is really a big problem, I feel. It doesn't feel like the rest of the buildings around here. And I think traffic is such a huge issue. Whenever there are deliveries, and you know, my husband, Richard Seide's written 3 letters to the planning board. I've written 2. I don't know if you've ever read any of our letters. I feel like we have to talk here, or so there are many, many points that my husband has made about the traffic, and I have as well. Whenever there are deliveries being made to the liquor store, traffic stops. So I can't imagine what's going to happen when there's this other huge building with traffic and the garage letting out onto Elmwood. I just see it's just going to be a huge backup. A lot of the people here, we all have jobs. We have to get out, you know, leave in the morning. We have appointments to make. I can't imagine what it's going to be like when there are deliveries. So I would hope that the planning board would look at that. I would have thought, I understand that the buildings on Main Street, you know, you want it to be commercial, but I really feel like the garage should have let out onto Main Street and not onto a small street like this. It's just going to block things up for all the residents and the people that live in the various, you know, apartment building, as well as the condominiums here. It's just going to, so I don't understand how a traffic study could have been done or can be done in times of COVID, because you don't realize what the traffic is really going to be like when there are a lot more people living on Elmwood. And finally, I just want to say, I was on the board of the Historical Society in Carlisle, where I come from. And, you know, we really, you try to respect historical buildings. I just feel like that historical building is so dwarfed, and it is not going to, you know, even you look at colors or all the things you can do, that house is so dwarfed. If anything, I really feel strongly it should have been moved, and this tall building brought down to a much lower level. I mean, 2 or 3 stories max, and move the historical building and respect it for what it is. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to address real quickly your comment regarding deliveries. The planning board, independent of this project, but overall in the Center Business District, has had a handful of conversations about this. Members of the planning board, if you want to chime in at all. But that falls in line with actually the select board. It's outside of the planning board's authority. And so there's been discussions about that we may need to, just in general, as the town grows, because there's also the project that's over at Waterfield that's going in, obviously Elmwood, but along with all the deliveries and stuff, that is backing up a lot of the traffic, that it would be helpful if the select board looked at creating times when deliveries are allowed, and it's not during the high traffic points of when school starts, or they don't conflict with that. And so the planning board has been talking about it, about asking the select board to look into getting more sophisticated in their delivery management, I guess, for that impacts all the traffic and parking along the center, inside the Center Business District. So I just wanted, because you mentioned that'll also support you, because you have a lot of deliveries coming in as well around your complex. That'll also help around that complex as well. But it's just something that we've been talking about, and maybe as a planning board, we should discuss maybe sending a letter to the select board at some point very soon to say, can you please look into creating delivery hours? Brian,
I also did attend, made the same comment at one of the select board when they were talking about, it was a different topic, but I did bring it up there. I just think people don't really realize, like, there's deliveries every single morning to the liquor store. I don't think people realize that. And, you know, if you don't live here on the street, you don't know it, you know? But
Brian, did you have any comments in regards to deliveries and?
Well, the first comment I was going to make was going to be related towards the traffic study that was performed in November of 2019. So it was pre-COVID, normal time. So, and the peer review consultant Tool Design did review that traffic study and offered comments that we will incorporate into the decision of any kind. The issue that I just wanted to mention was that a traffic study was done, and it was done pre-COVID.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Mrs. Bracco, for your comments. Moving onward, it looks like we have Sally Dow, and that is the last hand that's raised. Sally, go ahead.
Thank you, Heather. I want to say the things that I'm really excited about this project, and then I have some questions after that. So the thing that I think is great is that we are bringing housing to the center. It's a goal that we have established, and it will add vibrancy and economic and vitality to our center, which is something that we all are seeking. Change is inevitable for Winchester. We are close to the city, and we are under our state standards for providing affordable housing to the greater Boston area, our share of it, I should say. And the fact that this building is coming in as a mixed-use residential project with affordable housing is great. I also think it's great that the developer, Mr. Gillespie, and the architect, Mr. Tulukian, have worked very hard, and as has Dennis Carlone, to respond to the design questions, what Jamie referred to as, well, the bricks and the, you know, the window wells, whatever. But the larger question that I have, and perhaps Brian can go back to the previous set of slides that brings the Main Street sort of gateway image coming down Main Street from the north. This is in support of many of the neighborhood's concerns about size and scale. Yeah, this will do. Or maybe there's even one that's a little bit more like sort of right. What, this is good. Okay. So the goal that I would see, or what I would see that would be a reasonable adjustment to this, would be to have the Main Street facade be what we would call a 3.5-story facade, like you see along Elmwood and like what you see along Vine. And the other question that I would have has to do with a conversation from the last hearing about the sort of the gaping jaw of the 3 open balconies facing north. There was considerable discussion, which I agreed with, that they just looked like I just described it, like gaping jaws, and it belies the concept of a cornice at the top of the building. The building itself, the 4 stories on Main Street, it is very close to the street. And I totally agree with Katie's comments about the crowding of the sidewalk and the crowding of the street relative to wanting to create a vibrant sort of public-private interface, that public realm streetscape feel. I don't think it's been achieved there. So I'm also extremely mindful of the need for any developer coming into Winchester to have it be economically viable. I think that to the extent that market rate development is just, it's going to just keep going up, what, 6% a year, whatever it is, to me means that developers will not necessarily have a hard time making their numbers. I don't know what percentage profit is sought with a project like this, but if they are willing to, I don't know what the expression is, curb their appetite and listen to the neighbors about height and mass, and understand that as a gateway building, a 3.5-story building would be a better solution. I'm still not convinced, as I said, about the open balconies on the end and how there's this suspended cornice that doesn't relate to the building at all. And I guess my question would be, what conversations took place between Mr. Gillespie, Mr. Chalukian, and Mr. Carlone in response to the last meeting's conversations about reducing the scale of the mass of the building on Main Street? What conversations took place about eliminating these sort of open gaps in the facade of the building? Everyone likes a balcony, but I don't think it serves the look and feel of the building. And I guess my last question would be, if the building is reduced to 3.5 stories, it's the same number of units, the square footage would be reduced. And is there a sense of what percentage of impact on profit any developer would experience from making that fairly significant change in what's proposed here? Because as it is right now, to me, it still looms over Main Street. It is an important gateway location. And I just don't think that this building, as much as I love what it's doing for the town in terms of housing and economic vitality, is serving the look and feel of that part of Main Street. So I think those are my comments.
Thank you, Sally. There were 3 questions that were part of that, Dennis, and to the application. There are 2 questions directed to you. In terms of, was there any discussion and since the last meeting in response to reduce the scale on Main Street?
To be honest, no. And as I've said before, I thought the building, first of all, Main Street is changing. That's a given. That was a mandate that was told me when I started doing the studies for the town, and other architects were as well. My proposal looked at both sides of Main Street, and this building hopefully someday will overlook an open space across the street defined by buildings. I had a 5-story building on Main Street and a 3-story behind. That is what I felt was right for this, given that the town wanted to have over 200 new apartments in the downtown, given that they wanted to strengthen the retail. So when the question of the balconies turning at the corner, I understood the comments. Cheryl Wolf on the planning board mentioned it, and others might have mentioned it. But the more I looked at it and looked at this view right as we see it, I see the open corner created by the balconies, reducing the density of the building as you go up Vine Street. And then the second facade with a slightly different colored brick broken down, those two together begin to look like townhouses facing Vine Street, slowly introducing the historic house behind, and then the neighbor up the hill right there. Thank you, Brian. And I thought that was wonderfully scaled for the situation. One easy way would take the roof off of the top 4th floor balcony, let it be open to the sky. But the architect, Ted Chalukian, strongly believed in carrying the mass around the corner. And this process of design review is a 2-way street. In fact, with the planning board and the public, it's a 4-way street. So you don't win every battle. You see the logic that the architect has, and there's a lot of give and take. There are a lot of things that, quite frankly, I won on in changing the building, but you have to maintain the overall strength and character of the design. I didn't try to change this to be the massing I had or the designs I've done on my own buildings. I worked with what there is saw it as very respectful, despite I understand the issues with the neighbors. Despite that, given all the particulars that are legal documents, I felt this was a very good design. And I still feel that way. Is it perfect? No, I don't know anybody who is. But this is very respectful, and it's suffering because it's the first building on Main Street in downtown in this new century.
Dennis,
You know-
the second question was, did you discuss at all with the applicants the to eliminate the gaps at this corner perspective that we're looking at, that the overhanging cornice?
I just
Or her words,
addressed
eliminate
that.
gaps.
I just addressed it. We talked about it. I suggested the balconies be put on the back corner where there's two next to the wooden house, where there's two, yes, in that location. And they felt that that would overshadow the historic house in the neighborhood more so. I looked at the floor plans. You know, this isn't just facade work. It has to work with the inside of the building. And that floor plan, I agree, this is the proper place for it. Sure, we discussed it. And in the end, I concluded that this was the right way to do it, for the reasons I said answering the first question. It breaks the scale down as you go up Vine Street.
While we're talking about the balconies, I actually had a question for you as well about the gaps that they're referring to, because there's nothing there holding up that corner visually. And so and I never brought it up, but I'm going to bring it up now, is if you did, instead of having it wide open, you did it as frames with screens, you would give the visual of that corner being supported and still have the prominent corner with the balcony. I don't know. It's just something that came up as a design concept to help. I know a lot of people are feeling uncomfortable about this corner overhanging with no support, right? Visually, it's hanging out there, but that's one way I thought of how you could do it. You still get the patterns to mimic the windows, but it's actually screened, so you get the open view. But just
structurally, this can certainly happen. And most balconies in 1960s, 70s, 80s buildings just project out without any columns, 8 feet. So it's not something unusual. You know, my feeling is the architect felt strongly about this. I think it's a very handsome building. I think once it's built, people will feel better. The fact that it's number one, it puts this building with a target on it. I understand all the comments. I wrote the standards, the design standards with the planning board acceptance. But you have to look at the whole picture, and that includes the plans. And again, people were saying they wanted Vine Street to be broken down in scale. And look what the architect has done. He's pushed the second expression of brick building back. It's not in the same plane as the corner. He's put a slanted roof on it, and he has the balconies breaking up the corner, so it's not a massive corner. Look at that view. I think that's exceedingly successful from a town design point of view.
Thank you, Dennis. The other question was to the applicants, is if you went down to a 3.5 from a 4 profit loss. I don't anticipate you actually have that answer, but if you did, I want to just make sure it was asked as it was requested.
No, Madam Chair, I don't have any answer to that.
Thank you. Going forward, there are 2 people, individuals who are on this call who are identified as on their phone without video, who, if they wanted to speak, they can unmute themselves. I'll give you about 20 seconds to unmute yourself if you had a question of those 2 individuals. Otherwise, we will move on.
One of them is part of the applicant team. So I don't think they're.
Yeah, I think if you haven't found your mute, if for any reason anyone else would like to provide comments or feedback to the planning board, please know we are reading everything. We are checking everything, and you can reach all of us at the planning board at winchester.us if you have any further comments or things that you would like us to take into consideration. At this moment, I would take into a motion of the board to end public input.
I'm so moved, and we'll have make a motion to continue the hearing to a time certain, and Brian will have to help me.
Do you want to do that as one, or let's do it as two separate? Can we do it as two separate votes, Maureen?
I guess so.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Hannon, aye.
Charius, aye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Von Mering, aye. 5-0. The board is closing public input. And then at our next time certain, we will do a vote in a minute on that. But in our next time certain, we will begin our deliberations and go forward with step 13 and 14 in our hearing procedures. I would like to entertain a motion to continue to a time certain. Brian, did you have a recommendation of when that would be?
I think doing it this 8 o'clock time frame gives us time before as well as after to conduct business. So I recommend the 23rd at 8 o'clock.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
I just want to confirm that town engineering will at that point be able to provide us their feedback.
Yes, I believe they're.
So, I mean,
there you go.
the applicant hasn't provided responses to the peer review comments. And, you know, this is a very complicated drainage and flooding issue, and I'm relying fully on the peer reviewers to ensure that what is being done meets the state and federal standards. So I won't have any comments to provide on that. And really it's, you know, again, it's the comments are coming from the peer reviewer, and those issues have not been resolved. And I believe the Concom hearing has been continued till February 23rd. So I'll have some comments on other items, you know, water, sewer connections, maybe some sidewalk comments, but the crux of it is the making sure that they're meeting the, you know, the state and federal requirements with respect to flooding and other issues, and that is solely in the hands of the peer reviewers at this point.
So to the application team, the engineering is awaiting your response to your peer review. I don't think the planning board should continue the hearing until that is complete at this point. And so would it be best to postpone that date to a different further out so you have ample time to respond to the peer review? That's a question to the application team.
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm hoping Beals Associates may be as well, because they have been interacting with the peer reviewer, whom we know quite well. And Beth, there's nobody I respect more in the Winchester hierarchy than Beth Rudolph. She does a phenomenal job. But Beth, we have responded to VHB, I believe, in some detail. But that's,
I guess I meant more or less of a response as like revised plans, right? So they're expecting a whole nother set of documents to review prior to the next Conservation Commission meeting. That is the response. You know, maybe you've provided kind of written responses to their comments, but you know, new project documents to support those comments, I guess, is the request.
Well, two thoughts. Certainly, we will do that. If Todd Morey or Larry Beals is on, perhaps they can answer with more specificity. But I believe where we are, there's sort of two issues here. One is the whole calculation of compensatory flood storage. I don't think there's any issue about that whatsoever. The second is this highly technical question of unimpeded flow of floodwaters into the compensatory flood storage. Because we are proposing, I wouldn't say it's a highly innovative design, but it's simply it's not a common design. One of the Conservation Commission members said that this may be an answer, a solution that could be used throughout the town, formerly known as a very wet place, Waterfield. So we believe we have solved all of the problems. We will certainly continue to work with VHB as we have with everybody.
And I believe that Todd is on this call.
Terrific. If Todd can answer
I just want to
specifically,
make sure that we schedule appropriately so we're not just meeting and spinning wheels. We would like to meet and really keep in the meat of everything. So Todd, if you're here, would you be able to get those revised drawings and stuff? Or is that doable?
Yeah, we communicated with Brian Zerkelli today that the full written response and updated package will go back to VHB next week.
Which would not be in time pretty much for the 23rd meeting. It's going back to VHB next week, and then VHB would basically, the town engineer is asking for some type of a comment letter from VHB based upon your revised design. So it looks like the 23rd, there won't be a revised memo from VHB by that time.
So with that, to the members of the planning board, the 23rd hearing date is not going to work in terms of doing a continuation to that time certain.
Well, Madam Chair, if we could consider that just for a moment, please. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Conservation Commission issue is a separate. Obviously, we're going to fulfill those requirements, but if we can move forward with the planning board, this is a Conservation Commission issue. And Todd, perhaps you can better.
If you let me finish what I was going to recommend to the members of the planning board, it sounds like that most likely the March 2nd might be a better date versus the 23rd. We have a lot of things that we need to get done before for town meeting as well, and things we need to discuss. I was wondering if the 2nd of March may work with your schedules to.
I'm going to have to interrupt you there, Heather, because March 2nd, we have, that is the time that we scheduled for our, for a public hearing related to the North Main Street study, which is off of our current planning board meetings are March 9th and the 23rd. So we put that to the 2nd. If you wanted to do, I don't know, 90 minutes of that, I just want to let you know that we do already have kind of 90 minutes, maybe even closer to, maybe an hour 45 of an agenda item already.
Okay, so members of the planning board, what would you like to do? And there are crickets.
Well, I guess
I can't find my mute button.
Oh, go for it, Dia.
You found it, Dia.
I found it. Maybe I should turn it back on. I am, I'm torn. I want to see this project move forward. I don't know. I'm fine with the March 2nd date if that is required. I really, with the understanding that the development team will meet the requirements, that can be, if we do actually come to a decision on our next meeting, that can certainly be obviously that would be a contingency of our decision. So I don't feel it absolutely necessary that we get the report from engineering on the flood issues, although we obviously, it has to be part of the final package. So I guess I'm open to doing it in February on the 20 whatever.
I'd go with the February date.
Stick with the 23rd. All right.
Heather, just to point out also, typically what we've done in the past on something like this is that we would say that obviously they have to comply with the order of conditions from the Conservation Commission. That doesn't mean anything, but it's really then if there's any substantial changes to the exterior of the building due to that, then it potentially could come back for review. But that's how typically we would do this, is if it's not affecting anything on the outside and it passes all of the necessary wetlands protection bylaw and goes through Concom, we're not involved there. So it's like, that's just how we've done it in the past. So I don't see it as an absolute necessary thing in order to make a decision.
For Concom's part of it. For Beth, are you comfortable with that then for the 23rd to have a memo on behalf of everything you can review outside of Conservation Commission's work?
Yeah, so I told Brian, we just got the plans last week, that I would have a memo to him by the end of this week with anything, kind of site related comments that we have. But again, we're fully relying on the peer reviewers for the flooding and stormwater review of this project. So you won't get any additional comments from me in that piece.
And from traffic, you're all set there as well, Beth?
Yeah, again, I mean, I mentioned to Brian, my only concern was just with the loading piece, with the loading entrance for Fells Hardware being on Vine Street and the loading parking being on Main Street. What I don't want, is for trucks, to find it easier to park on Vine Street to bring the deliveries into the Fells Hardware, and whatever the design team can do to prevent that from happening, I think is important. So we don't have trucks parking in that area.
Sounds good. So it sounds like the motion stands on the 23rd and seconded. Roll call vote, please, to continue the hearing on the 23rd at time certain, 8 p.m.
Hannon, aye.
Jarius, aye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Von Mering, aye. Motion passes 5-0. We'll continue the hearing on February 23rd at 8 p.m. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for everyone who spoke and contributed their thoughts and feedback and questions. And also thank you for all of our consultants for helping us through this process, along with all town staff. Moving onward to our agenda, I would like to return back to Washington and Swanton review of the RFP. And we left off, I think, on page 8. But before we proceed, I'd like to actually bring up my point that I have regarding Washington Swanton is when town meeting took up warrant article for this property, the only language that was available in the warrant article was for affordable housing, that the land would be acquired to do affordable housing. There was no mention of commercial on this site. So I mentioned it to Brian today because it's unclear to me if they actually can proceed in this without town meetings consulting, because there's no reference of commercial in the presentation. And then also the overviews that they had done of this land for that to town meeting, which we never really saw until the day of town meeting, pretty much, only addressed affordable units, and those proposals only showed there's no commercial in there. And now the RFP includes commercial. I do think, on my personal perspective, that commercial should be included in that. I think that is, but I don't think that actually is what town meeting authorized the select board to proceed with. So my concern with this RFP is that it does not meet what came before town meeting. So
I think it's a very good point.
Because I think I like the direction of the RFP. I think it's just a technicality, and it's an issue because that's what was sold to town meeting. That's what they told town meeting they were going to do. And now we're doing something different. And so I don't mean to be like the stick in the mud, but I think there's issues here. And I think that's the problem with this whole process for Waterfield and Swan, is that we weren't part of going to town meeting. We didn't review, we weren't part of those conversations of that warrant article. We didn't talk about, well, it's not just affordable housing. You want to look at also mixed use. There's no language of mixed use in any of the language to town meeting. So it's a big sticky wicket that I wanted to bring up, is because it kind of impacts this whole thing. But
Madam Chair.
Should we just ask council?
Yeah,
it's a council question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a council question. But I just want to make sure you guys knew about it, because I would think the planning board should just note it and let the parties be that take care of it. Any comments? Okay, Maureen, we can go back to where you were at. You're on page 8, I believe.
Well, I would be jumping to page 10 from there.
Can we stop at page 8 real quick?
A point of order, if you might.
Yep, go ahead, DM.
I think Dennis was trying to say something.
Oh, Dennis.
Thank you, Chair and Diab. I just wanted to say the obvious. When the neighbors were asked what they wanted, they highlighted some activity use at the ground floor. And from a town design point of view, at an important corner, that made sense. It doesn't mean that the developer has to do retail at the ground floor or a communal facility. That would be viewed as a positive, but I understand your point. I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I don't want to speak on behalf of the board, but I'm gonna just, you guys correct me, you can jump in. But I think that we agree with that sentiment. The problem is the process and the steps taken to get to this RFP to submit it so that it goes before town meeting is to secure the land. The reason the land is being secured is for affordable housing, not mixed use, is what the Warren article said. So there's a technicality in that, and then going to an RFP that is a mixed use with affordable housing component in it. So and just making sure that this is actually the right steps. It's not that the design and the RFP as it's proposed is something we're against. It's the technicality of how you work through securing land through eminent domain to then go and do an RFP on it. Diab, I know you had questions too. I just want to make sure before we move on, was it anything that we've gone through already?
No, actually, all of my comments have to do with the design criteria at the end.
Okay, so we'll keep going through just the pages as we go. Brian, and planning board, I want to point out that this is not our project, and Brian is taking the lead on this in terms of project coordination. This goes back to keep coaching our staff. Yep. Brian, you're excellent. You do an amazing job. You know exactly what you're doing, but this is getting to a point where it's like, we're not, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, this is part of why we need economic development staff. And that's,
really economic development. This is really about housing. And
yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. I misspoke there.
It does fall under the planner's role. I think the bigger question, but I don't want to spend time on it. That's the planning board should be having some role in this. And that's why I keep putting language in there that at least, this is really asking for peanuts here, chump change, just to have call out who these feedback from local boards and committees, who are they? Well, we're one of them, and we ought to be named. Frankly, as you all recall, with the RFP for the Waterfield site, we had the joint meeting with the select board and agreed that there would be a meeting, another joint meeting with the planning board and select board, so we'd have feedback before it went forward to town meeting. And then that was taken out by the chair of the select board. So anyway, with that in mind, I'd like to just jump ahead to page 10 and ask that it's under the development concept narrative, and it's under B, discussion, there we go, of the physical plan. And then the second to last bullet point, it's how does your proposal consider the previous design concepts for the property? Well, I was as liaison to the design review committee, just listening. They had comments which were similar to my own reaction, which was the Melanson proposal is not something we care for. It's not clear at all in this RFP that that's in there, and we don't care for it. So I think that having anybody start to address that, I just think that should be stricken. We're going too far down the path with proposals that this board had did not review, did not endorse, and just so anyway, you guys can
there also was no public. They really for the design concepts. well, first of all, there was just one, and that was for a friendly 40B, and that was a very preliminary, and even in that meeting that when we asked questions, they didn't have a lot of the answers. So it's very, very preliminary. It wasn't all the kinks or if it was even feasible. The other part of it is that the studies that the select board did, we never saw until it was just how many units can you cram in here on the site. And so I don't think, and there was appropriate public feedback to include those at this point, to say that you need to meet these design concepts because they were not vetted by not only us, but also the community at large.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. And I further think that it confuses the issue because we want them to follow the design standards in this RFP. We don't want them to follow. I mean, that's the whole point of bringing in Dennis and Cheryl and getting this thing out, working on it. So there's no point in looking back. We want them to look forward. So I would strike that as well.
Yeah, this is Cheryl and Dennis. You'll probably remember this as well. The designs were put into the body of the RFP, and we asked for it to, at a minimum, go to the appendix. And I completely agree with what you're saying. I did not see this this reference to previous design concepts bullet point before. So I would remove it as well. I don't think it's a good design solution, and it's yeah.
Cheryl, you are a representative in that committee. So if you would bring that back when this draft is reviewed again, it's not just you speaking now. You're speaking for all of us.
I understand that, Maureen. Thank you. I do believe that that we did focus in on Dennis expressing the design, bringing what he had written and everyone has worked on for so many years, bringing that to the design standards to this, but not trying to end up with a developer who comes back with an exact replica of what what the pictures look like. But we did want to make sure that people were including three-dimensional views of the corner and of any of their design concepts. And I think that's where that's probably where that design or that concept being represented was thought of as an advantage. But I did see someone else make a comment about taking those elevations and that perspectives out of the RFP altogether, appendix included. So I'm in agreement with that. And we'll put that forward.
Thank you. Okay, page 10.
Yeah, and then it's similar on page 16. It says concept drawings from Melanson proposal. It's under the appendices.
So you want 28 stricken, and I don't even know why CVS is on there, but it didn't mean everything. So
just a quick thing. So these are the appendices. This is basically done specifically to, we know that whoever's going to apply for these is going to ask for these things. There's no, oh, there was a previous CVS. Okay, can we see that? I mean, there's no doubt. And we all kind of agreed. I was also at the design review committee meeting that at the very least we said that everything should be here, but there is talk of striking it completely. The plans from CVS, honestly, they're going to be asked for. So it's a question of, we could totally take them out and then put them up on a website, for example, which we've done previously for Waterfield. So maybe the answer is that we put these appendices if they really want them out, obviously not the design standards and the site feasibility study, but it's kind of everything else between their concept drawing, site plans, those two. Everything else could be on a website.
So if
CVS, I was in the design review committee meeting, as you know, they were clear. They did not like the Melanson proposal. They asked to have it out. So they said they didn't want it. And there's a concern about if it's going to be left in, then it needs some kind, I don't think it should be, but if it were in, then it needs some kind of language that says this has not been reviewed nor endorsed.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should remove it. I think that It provides visual cues that we perhaps don't want.
Right.
And I think putting it up on the website is an appropriate way of, I mean, this is our direction for how they should look at things.
Right.
So let's not just confuse the issue.
I think it also goes back to whatever it was, page 5 or whatever earlier, where I said we need to be explicitly clear that CVS was an application that was approved, it was appealed, and appealed withheld. So that when you look at the CVS, you know exactly the history of it and that why it did not proceed. And Melanson is a whole nother ballgame because that was really a proposal that even it was like so preliminary, and it was just okay, so now we're going to talk, instead of about commercial there, we're going to talk about mixed use, and this is what we're thinking. Let me get your feedback so we can go to the drawing board and really go to it. So it was one session and one meeting, and it didn't go through the planning board didn't really partake in it. I mean, we were there, but I think it is misleading to the people of RFP, and I think it's unfair to them unless it explicitly states what it is and what it's from and where it stood in the process, and that it wasn't reviewed and it wasn't vetted.
Yeah, and the town had nothing to do, in a sense, with the Melanson proposal. It was their work, they did it. So I think it's inappropriate.
I agree with pulling it. I just think with the CVS, when you go back, Brian, let's be explicitly clear of the language to request, or whoever's going to write the memo.
No. Well, the good thing is that between Dennis, Cheryl, and myself, you have 3 people of that working group. We are hearing the message, and you don't have to convince us. Period.
No, are we going to write a memo back, or I guess?
I can certainly put our points together and have it run by the chair, run by you before. But I've been taking notes here on the specific pages, and also agree with all the sentiments so far. So it's not a heavy lift for me, Cheryl, or Dennis.
Yeah, I'm marking up the PDF as well. So we'll be prepared for the next meeting.
Yeah, I also think now too, pending on if we proceed with a vote too, Cheryl, that'll give you that you have the vote of the full planning board, versus before is almost you're kind of left to fend for yourself with that vote. I mean, it was your own personal opinion, but now you'll have our support behind you as well.
Sounds good.
We're going on to page 16. Did we miss any comments between 10 and 16?
I'm fine. The next thing would just and then maybe Deb has comments, but the one, I was pleased to see in the design standards things like, there are a couple of phrases. One was on page 5, design goals as determined by the planning board zoning appeal. Well, it needs to be edited, and town planning staff. I'm wondering, and how is the planning board? Also page 6, it also says planning board and board of zoning appeal. That all needs to be clarified. I think
true. That's true. I didn't know what to write, to be honest.
Well, it needs to be figured out here. I do think that there should be explicit, because this has to go in as a friendly 40B, or it's a 40B, but because it's going that route, it's going to be before this zoning board of appeals, and as a result, there needs to be an explicit sequence so that the input from the planning board is secure.
So does that mean we need to specify a schedule of how things are going to proceed? Is that what you're saying, Maureen?
Well, maybe not a schedule, but at least a explicit statement that the planning board will be, we're advisory to the ZBA, but I don't know, is that enough?
Well, is this language not strong enough?
I would say it's murky.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it's what are the design goals? I believe these design standards are, well, I think this is what we should shape rather than necessarily say anything. This sentence is saying, effectively achieve the overall architectural and town design goals as determined, I think it's really as determined by this document.
Then we don't need an exception.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt, like Maureen said, that this will go to the Zoning Board of Appeals with comments from the DRC, Planning Board, Historical Commission, and Disability Access Commission, and Police and Fire and Engineering. So that's going to happen no matter what. But if we're actually talking about a town design goal, or to, you know, I think it actually has to do with this document and not with any body.
I agree with you. I'm just wondering if this document encompasses everything we want, then why do we need to have an exception? If we were to simply strike out the whole thing about exception.
Exception. Who's? Only.
So it's an exception to the standards. If there's going to be an exception to the standards,
then we don't.
At the end of the day, the exception would still only be from the standards from the Zoning Board of Appeals. You could say with recommendations from the Planning Board, but
can I say why that's in there?
Sure. Yep.
We constantly get architects and developers who think, and I'm not talking about the earlier project, in my lifetime, they all think they have great ideas. And they say, well, this is too rigid. So now we say, or I've said, well, if you have a good idea and it meets the goals, we'll go with it. I can tell you honestly, no one has ever achieved that. So they fall back on the design standards.
I think it's worse to say, because then they'll say this.
Fine.
I think that's worse. Sorry, but I'll leave it to you guys.
Well, all I can tell you is it's worked in the past, but I have no problem taking out anything.
So, I mean, I guess where I'm coming from is I think there's enough flexibility in the way the design standards have been written that, I mean, there are a lot of qualitative statements in here which can be interpreted. There's a range of interpretations that should encompass acceptable designs.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dia. Yeah.
So I think you can strike that last sentence, an exception to the standards, because there's a lot of wiggle room in these. So the last sentence of the elements of form could be stricken, and it just says introduction. The thrust of the development standards is to maximize design quality and integrate all projects into the neighborhood and streetscape, and then move on to A height.
I would be comfortable with that.
Me too.
Okay, next.
Let's see. So I have some typos and I have an overall comment about the design standards, and I recognize a lot of that a lot of the stuff from CBD has been moved in here, but there still is a flavor of it not quite matching, and some of it's just language that needs to be cleaned up, I think. But there's just a typo if we get to on that page B, scale proportion of elements. And let's see, paragraph number 2. Oh, shoot. Are my pages off?
I don't think we should do typos in this meeting.
No. There's a statement which says each project may need to submit for review must be accompanied by. And I believe I have that on the wrong page.
I think the traditional neighborhood height around this vicinity is not 3 stories. I think it's 2 to 2.5 stories.
It's true.
Which is on page 5. It says 2 to 3 stories, which means they're going to go to 4, but the actual height is 2 to 2.5 stories.
That's correct.
It's the actual topography that makes them look taller because they're all on a hill going up.
Okay.
I don't, yeah, that it's probably the majority are lower, but at that corner where we're talking about there being a, an opportunity to address a very a strong corner with potentially some retail at the bottom. I'd rather leave it a little more flexible than to end up with, someone really saying, look, we really couldn't do retail because of your height restrictions. It's just not going to happen.
Oh, I was just saying
Oh.
what the buildings around it are. They're all 2.5 stories. They're not 3 stories. It says that the traditional neighborhood height. What is the traditional neighborhood height around there? It's all.
So when you say three stories, you don't count the attic space, the windows up at the top?
That's why you call it 2.5.
Okay, got it.
It's zoning.
Okay, I have
I'm a
now
novice.
discovered I've discovered my problem is we're at page 5 and I was at page 1. And so you're still at page 5. If you could go back.
You know what? It's 10:15. I'm going to fall asleep soon, right here with my video.
Okay.
I can't.
Okay, so let's go to the second paragraph in B. It's just, you know, the one right below it. Each project may need to submit for review, must be accompanied by. Okay, so it's got to be one or the other.
Can some of this be done outside this meeting? I caught that
Yes.
too. This isn't the time.
Yeah, well, I have, you know, I have more.
What's the timing for us to give these edits?
Well, I thought we had to give them by the end of the week.
Just change it out to each project shall review.
Yeah,
Each
yeah.
project shall be accompanied by.
So,
Okay.
to Heather's Hannon's question, the idea was to go through this and to develop a memo to give to the select board by by the end of the week. So, you know, that I would send something to by the end of the week, encompassing all of these comments.
It's just feeling very detailed for after 10 p.m. and we're not very far. So is
Well,
there a lot of
I-
these things that we do by email? And if someone has something high level that they have an issue with, we talk about that.
Sure. I unfortunately will not be able to do anything until Friday morning at the earliest. So let's get to page 3 under open space. No, okay, you got it. 2 more pages. I'm numbering them based on the numbers on the bottom of the page there. Yeah, okay, right there. So if we get to A, open space on that page, there's a confusion I have about where exactly the open space will be. So first off, a minimum of 10 to 20% doesn't make any sense. We have to choose 10 or 20. You can't give them a range, otherwise it's not a minimum. But there's also a question, is this all going to be in the resident courtyard? Is it also, I mean, there's various statements about open space throughout this, and I think there's a confusion about where it's going to lie. And is it going to be open space that's just for residents? So there's a couple of comments on that. And that's just a broad comment. There's a number of places. We can move on to one of my concerns is there's if we go to page 4 very quickly, again, there's confusion as to how, I think there's, if we go to A under retail, it talks about contiguous frontage on both sides of the street. I think there's confusion here between what's specific to this site and what's been taken from the CBD. And if we could clean that up. If we go to page 5, there's a discussion about height. And that's under elements of form, height. And it states no building element may project vertically beyond the maximum height allowed. But there is no indication of what that height will be. If this is a 40B, they can go beyond what's under the zoning. So we don't have a height that's specified, so I don't know how it all fits in. There's also if we're going to talk about widening, and this goes on to further pages, if we're going to talk about widening public sidewalks and we're talking about street walls and setbacks, the two concepts kind of, you know, if you maintain the street walls of the existing, of the rest of the street, but then you want to push back the public sidewalks, there's a tension there. So we have to decide which is more important.
The intent is it's a 5-foot setback at both sides. one for screening, because there will be there's a great slope on the side street. And on the other one, if there's retail, you want outdoor seating near it. That was the thinking. The problem is there's no drawing, there's no design. So I'm incorporating as many of the things that are important, not knowing even what I want to do. So I'm trying to include everything. And I agree it needs editing. As far as 10 to 20% of open space, 10% is an interior courtyard in my head for the people living there, because there's nothing else. The rest is parking behind. And the rest of the open space is the 5-foot setback, a buffer to existing neighborhoods, houses. But again, it's trying to put a design into guidelines.
Yeah, I just found the phrase, it was confusing to someone coming in saying you have a minimum of 10 to 20%, which case I'll say, okay, I'll take 10%.
No,
so
that was for somebody to say what it is.
Okay.
That was my first draft, and it's one of the two. And the courtyard by itself is 10%.
Well, the Center Business District, we have 20%.
Yeah, I think we should go with the 20, especially since this is a less urban area.
Again, the interior courtyard is 10%, plus everything else is 20%.
Got it.
Okay.
So we'll clarify that.
Yeah. And then I think that.
Can I ask why you use the word interior? Because quite frankly, the density that we're calling for here and the way the street is higher than the site, we're going to end up with an interior that's just a big shadow box. It could end up being that if we say it has to be interior.
Well, it has afternoon light, and it would be off the lobby, and it would buffer part of the parking lot. Okay. If you put it on the outside, on the sidewalk, you could do that, but it seems to me I'm more concerned about the residents in this building having a place to hang out.
But why can't we just see what we get like we did for Waterfield?
Yeah, I think so too. I'd rather leave it
so prescriptive.
Leave it open.
So people can be like thoughtful and designers rather than rule.
I will do what you want. All I can tell you is if you don't guide them, forget it.
Well, we can guide them with the 20% minimum, and then they can define whether it's on the outskirts or if it's in an interior courtyard.
They're all gonna, okay, fine.
What are they all gonna do?
It around the building? Okay.
Well, we definitely want we want private space for the residents. So I understand the tension there.
Why don't we call it resident amenity as opposed to public amenity in terms of open space?
That makes sense.
Yeah, because I don't know that I would want them to include widened public sidewalks as part of their open space, because that's going to be part of, as you rightly point out, you can put tables there, etc. So that's actually a commercial benefit rather than a benefit to the residents.
All right, I like it. Resident amenity, 20% minimum.
Yeah.
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I just thinking you were close to finished. So I just have one big question for the planning board in terms of my experience level. And one of the things that's in here about rating the contract or the developers. So
go ahead. I will put all my stuff in a very short memo. So go ahead.
Thank you.
So if you go back to the matrix that is being presented on how to rate the developers, it's an evaluation criteria. And in that, we decided that, not all evaluation criteria should be created equal. And this was put together. Brian, you might know more. People on the committee were supposed to give their thoughts about this. I'm curious about the idea that the developer, since this is a term, it's being done in terms of land disposition. How exactly, we need to pick a developer who's going to succeed, right? Who's not going to like take us down the road on a design for 6 months and then it just blows up because they didn't really do the due diligence on how to buy this property from the town. And these are just things I don't understand well enough. And you guys talk a lot about 42B and things that are, I'm just starting to get a grasp of. So I was wondering, this being on the low end and 1X, is that, should there be concern about that? And then are there other ones in this matrices of, priority that the evaluation criteria that, how do we want to see this succeed? We're going to put a lot of work into picking someone. And I'm just wondering if you guys had any thoughts about this rating system.
You're talking about number 10 specifically, that they're only giving it 1% weight.
Exactly. And I'm just not certain. I don't have experience with this, with how much is going to have to go into this for a developer to buy the land from the town. And if this just needs to be something that they spend more time proving to the town before they get selected.
It's actually an interesting point that you make, because in the past, when we've had developers who've come in who've been kind of blasé, like, you just tell me what you want and I'll do it, right? We've had that. We had it at the farm. They tend to not actually come in with concrete, really strong ideas. And they get pushed to the bottom because they're just kind of not concrete and stable. But I don't know, in the rating, even if you put it at 3X, it'll give it more points, but it really shouldn't. If they can't come in with a clear concept, then why are they being reviewed at all? But
well, I think the one example we have of where we use this matrix was at Waterfield, and the fact that we required such a high percentage of SHI or of subsidized or deeded affordable housing meant that they actually had to go in and get they had to go hook up with various government programs, and there was a lot of analysis of I think point number 10, which I think is something similar to, correct me if I'm wrong, on the Waterfield RFP. So I think that we will get the details required to evaluate the project, just because of where they're going to have to get the funding.
Because of the amount of affordable housing that we're requiring as a 3X is what you're saying.
Yeah, because they won't be able to get the money to build it in order to make up for the losses on the affordable units. They typically have to go in and get government funding.
Okay, so then they'll have a real clear financial model that will support number 10.
That's my impression, but the rest of the board may disagree with me.
Well, when we scored the Waterfield ones, we weren't the ones, I'm talking about the committee, we weren't the ones looking at the financials because that wasn't our area of expertise. So we ended up not even really scoring that one. Isn't that right, Brian? We just scored all the other categories, and I think someone else looked at their private financials.
Yeah, so a number of mass housing so a number of professionals at mass housing did look at those financials. This is more of checking of a box. It's in number 10, meaning that it's not evaluating those terms. It's saying, did they supply those terms? And then we can obviously talk, there'll be a lot of debate at FinCom and others about those terms. This is more of, did they provide it? Did they outline those key terms?
Okay.
So it's less concerned about the value of that response.
Okay. All right. That's helpful.
All right, we're reaching breaking point of everyone, including myself. So
Yeah,
I'm good to go.
can we get a motion?
Wait, hold on. Sorry, Heather. So the idea is that, so I have all these comments. I've copied them down. I'm going to develop them into a memo to give to the select board before the end of the week. If there's going to be anything else that you haven't said this evening that you would like to get into that memo, email me directly.
And when do you need that by, Brian?
I would like to get this to the select board on Friday.
Right. So when do you want to drop that for input to you?
Yeah, I guess I could, Thursday morning. Is that possible? Thursday early afternoon, that I could at least compile everything.
I will try. I will not just try. I shall do it.
Can we do can I entertain a motion from the planning board to allow me to sign on behalf of the board based on the composition to make judgment to represent the board in this situation? I can sign it.
So moved. So moved.
Like what, Heather? I'm sorry.
So because there's some additional information coming in that the planning board gives me the authority to represent the planning board at this point to include or not include pending on its validity to our conversation and the direction overview of the direction the planning board just provided. It gives me the ability to sign it so it comes from the entire planning board without the whole planning board having to view it.
I got you. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I moved that we do that. We authorize you.
All right, and there's a second, which is Diab, correct?
No, I thought I was the first, but I'll be the second.
Maureen's the second. I'm sorry. Diab's the first. Maureen moved it.
Doesn't matter. I'll be third.
Nancy, you got it. We're late here. She's like, all right, roll call vote, please.
Hannon, aye.
Curious, aye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Von Mering, aye. Motion passes 5-0. We'll develop that. I'll sign the memo and we'll get it off to the select board before the end of the week. Well, before our end of the week. It might be afternoon, Brian's end of the week. So on that note, I think I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, Heather Hannon, second by Diab. We roll call vote, please.
Hannon, aye.
Curious, aye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Von Mering, aye. Motion passed 5-0. The planning board meeting has adjourned. Thank you so much to WinCam. Thank you, Nancy, to our recording secretary, all the staff, all of our consultants, and also the public for all your comments and contributions at our meeting today. We will see you at our next meeting on February 23rd, which will also have the 8 p.m. hearing for Main Street. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.